I call to order the City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for September the 21st, 2023. Roll call, please.
Ballard.
Here.
Farrell. Here. Clapper.
Here.
Throckmorton.
Here.
Okay. We have two sets of minutes to approve, those from May the 25th, 2023, and those from August the 24th, 2023. If you have changes or amendments, anybody on either one of those? Okay, then I can entertain a motion for passage of both of those or acceptance of both of those.
I'll move for the approval of both minutes, which was, give me the dates again.
May 25th and August the 24th.
August 24th, 2023.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, can we have a vote, please?
Farrell. Yes. Clapper.
Yes.
Throckmorton.
Yes.
Ballard.
Yes.
Okay. Reports, resolutions, and communications.
Jackie, Human Development Services Manager. I think the only thing we want to say tonight is to remind those who are here that if you are going to speak, please sign in on the sheet that's on the podium, and there's a pen there as well, so that the people responsible for the minutes will be able to get your name. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this evening, the petitions that are continued to our October 19th meeting there's only one, and it's AA-17-22, Joe Kemp Construction LLC and Blackwell Construction, Inc. This evening on our docket, we have the following petitions. V-27-23, Brian Rental, Inc. and Crane of Indiana, LLC. V-28-23, Hoosier Commons, LLC. V-30-23, Scott Andrews. And lastly, V-31-23, Red Truck Bloomington, LLC. So we are ready for the staff report for the first petition, V-27-23, Brian Rental, Inc., and Crane of Indiana, LLC. Thank you.
Thank you. So as mentioned, the first petition is from from Brian Rental for a property at 123 South Kingston Drive. The petitioners are here tonight to request a variance from maximum parking standards to allow for 267 parking spaces for a retail sales large use in the mixed-use corridor zoning district. So this is for a property at 123 South Kingston Drive. It is zoned mixed-use corridor. The property has been developed with a 51,000 square foot building. The building has sat empty for several years. Adjacent land uses include a multi-tenant shopping center to the east. To the west, you have various multifamily residences. To the south, you have various commercial uses, and then further to the east, you have single-family neighborhood. So this property formerly contained the Marsh supermarket. It has sat empty for several years, and the petitioner or the owner has been working with a new tenant to move into the space, Academy Sports, to use that for a sporting goods store. So because the property has sat empty for more than a year, any new use that comes in is considered a change in use and has to meet the limited compliance standards of the UDO. So one of those standards is the removal of parking spaces over the maximum that is allowed. So the site has several surface parking lot spaces that are on the south side of the building and some to the east. There are currently 267 parking spaces. The use of the retail sales large 51,268 square foot building would only allow for 169 parking spaces. The site currently has 267. So approximately 98 parking spaces would have to be removed to bring the site into compliance. So the petitioner is requesting a variance in order to allow for all of the existing parking spaces to remain. So they have submitted a parking study as part of this. The parking study, though, really is just a count of 3 other locations and the number of parking spaces that are on that site. The parking information that's been submitted is not a usage study that we typically see with these maximum parking variances. Where somebody has gone out and actually counted the number of parking, the number of cars that are in the parking lot over the course of a day, over several days or weeks, to demonstrate a specific demonstrated need. The parking information, just as I mentioned, simply counts the number of spaces that are in the lot. With these variances from maximum parking standards, this usage study has been something that has always been submitted to help demonstrate a particular need. So we haven't really had that information submitted with this in order to make any findings to recommend something over the number of 169 parking spaces that would be allowed. So it should also be noted that the petitioner owns the immediately adjacent property that has been developed with a 14,000 square foot building. When that property came forward for development in 2006, they installed 126 parking spaces, expecting future office uses and retail uses. However, those adjacent buildings were not constructed, and there's only one building on the site now. And so there are approximately 80 parking spaces sitting empty on the immediately adjacent site owned by the petitioner that could be utilized for this use as well to help supplement some of these parking spaces that would be required to be removed. So with that, as we go through the required findings, we do make findings that the allowance, the granting of the variance to allow excess asphalt and parking above the maximum, it increases environmental impacts by allowing excess asphalt to remain on the site rather than bringing it into compliance with the amount of required landscaping as well as open space. It does not promote the use of alternative transportation options, such as bicycles, bus route transit, and is contrary to many of the goals and principles outlined in the comprehensive plan that were the reason behind maximum parking. These goals, these requirements were there to make sure that the amount of parking that is on a site is appropriate, that we don't have excess asphalt sitting there, that contributes to a lot of the environmental impacts that we see, excess stormwater runoff, heat island impact. So we do find that it will be injurious. And while we don't find any direct adverse impacts to the use and value of adjacent properties, we do find general harm in the overall community in terms of the view along the streetscape. So allowing this excess asphalt and parking there, it creates a visual buffer or a visual hindrance, as well as a lack of pedestrian connection opportunities through a site to a building. Walking through a sea of asphalt and parking, does not promote pedestrian accessibility to a building. So that does create a undesirable effect along the streetscape. In addition to, just the presence of asphalt and cars sitting there, goes against many of the goals within our comprehensive plan. And again, one of the big things, is that the strict application of the terms of the UDO will result in some practical difficulty in the use of property. The parking maximums that are in the zoning code apply to all properties, including retail uses. There are uses around Bloomington that have retail uses that meet this standard, and businesses are allowed to continue and remain. We do not find that there is anything unique about the property that does not allow them to remove the spaces. And more specifically, as I mentioned with the parking information and the parking study, the petitioners have not demonstrated any actual need based on usage to justify the extra spaces. That is a big component is, a parking study that demonstrates a specific demonstrated need, not just the presence of parking spaces in other locations, but, a study conducted over several days showing a demonstrated need. So with that lack of information, as well as, the other findings that I mentioned, the department recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt these proposed findings and deny this variance request. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Could the petitioner please step to the podium? Or the petitioner's representative? If you could state your name, and then I'll swear you in, and then you
My
have
name's
20
Tom Densford.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes.
It's all right. My name is Tom Densford. I'm a local attorney here. I work for Bryan Rentals, and I am here to speak in favor of the petition and also for, for Crane of Indiana, which is a co-owner of the property. It's kind of a last minute. I will try to speak up. So I'd like to start out with just a very brief history of the property. Mr. Gulick is correct. The property has sat empty for several years, 6 years in fact. It is under lease with the Kroger Company, who purchased the lease out of the bankruptcy of Marsh. And they are content to let the property sit idle, primarily to limit competition, make sure no other grocery store goes in there. So it has sat empty for an extended period of time, and every expectation that unless a new tenant can be found that is interested in the site, it will continue to sit empty, and it will continue to deteriorate and really provide very little activity other than what you've seen for the last 6 years. The property was for years back to the point in time when it was a service merchandise and then a marsh, part of a planned unit development. That PUD has been terminated within the last couple of years, and now it's zoned as a mixed-use corridor. Because of the change of use, there are conditions that will be imposed, and both the owner and the proposed tenant are perfectly willing to accept the terms of the restrictions of the change of use conceptually, but how those potential changes of use impact this property is where we vary a little bit. There's 267 spaces. They are spread from one end of the property to the other, from 3rd Street all the way up to Longview Avenue. It is our considered opinion that as part of the reuse of this property and the improvements that will be made to this property by Academy Sports, that there can be uses and upgrades to the existing parking that will bring it into compliance with current standards for the use of this kind of a property, and it will bring the number of available parking spaces much closer to what the current ordinance requires. So what we have done is looked at the various parking aspects and tried to come up with more creative ideas than simply for the existing parking spaces. So closest to 3rd Street, there are 26 spaces. This is a small parking facility in between the Big Red Liquors and the Subaru dealership. And one of the suggestions, one of the proposals that we would have as part of this development is to turn that area into a rideshare parking facility in partnership with the City of Bloomington, or in lease it to the City of Bloomington, that would allow commuters coming in from the east side of the county, from Columbus, Bartholomew, Jackson County, to have a space where they could join together and ride as a group into the downtown area or the IU campus. This is an idea and put in use in various metropolitan areas and seems to be quite successful. The idea would be to reduce pressure on existing parking in the downtown area and also to reduce traffic congestion from this point on East 3rd Street to points west into the parking or into town. There are also approximately 37 parking spaces on the east side of the building that would be or could be designated for electric vehicles. There is, to my knowledge, very few EV charging stations on the east side, and even fewer that are generally available to the public. We have reached out, made initial contacts with Tesla and their organization to determine the feasibility of this type of a use, but certainly between those two uses, we're talking about 63 parking spaces that are converted from otherwise the current historic use to something that's a bit more vibrant and a bit more useful, a bit more in step with the city's comprehensive plan and the goals for traffic flow throughout the city. There are other conceptual issues in terms of connecting the existing bike path on 3rd Street up into the facility, connecting it on both to Longview Drive and to Kingston, allowing for continuity of bicyclists and more options to get to other residential and commercial developments. There are spots picked out for bicycle racks and facilities. Academy Sports typically maintain a community facility which could occupy several of what are now designated as parking spaces. These are places that are designated for not-for-profit organizations to do fundraisers, to have meetings, to do sales and different things. And that, again, is in the spirit of community participation and using these designated areas for things other than traditional parking. There's been an effort to reach out to the Bloomington Transit Authority to see if there is any interest in a transit facility along Kingston, and that may as well occupy up to 5 spaces. As near as I can tell from inspecting the area, the closest covered the transit station is about a half a mile away on Longview Drive. So the idea is to put into play a number of potential uses that meet the various standards. They're not injurious to public health, safety, or morals, or public welfare. Quite the opposite. These facilities would be public improvements and provide increased public access. They would also contribute towards eliminating the risk of the further decay of this building or this property if Academy Sports is not selected as a tenant because of growth restrictions. In terms of the use and the value of the adjacent property area, again, these proposals and proposed uses within the parking facilities would be welcoming, increase public activity, and would not decrease the value or the use of the property in the adjacent area. And then lastly, your standard as to the strict application of the UDVO would result in practical difficulties in implementing these kinds of improvements if those spaces are eliminated entirely in order to meet a rather arbitrary calculation of ratio to from square footage to parking facilities. So what we're asking is that the discussion as to this proposal and this location and this proposed tenant continue, and that these ideas be well received, in terms of the overall improvements and developments to the property, which I will let John speak to. You got a pen? You can sign in here.
Good evening. My name is John Kraniak. I'm Senior Vice President of Real Estate, Store Design, and Construction from Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're located in Katy, Texas. So, yes, ma'am. Great. I'll write my name down afterwards. So thank you for the introduction. I'm here really just to, first off, say I'm honored to be here. Academy Sports and Outdoors is an 85-year-old company. We were a private company for a long time, born and raised in Texas. We currently operate stores in 18 states. We've been in the state of Indiana for a number of years, down in Terre Haute and Evansville, but we're really excited as part of our new growth strategy to expand our footprint, and Indiana is a significant portion of that expansion. We are extremely excited about Bloomington, Indiana. We're excited about the state of Indiana. In the last couple months, we've opened up a couple stores. We opened up in Lafayette. We opened up in Westfield. We have a couple other stores under construction in Indianapolis, and Bloomington is the next logical progression for us. We've been market planning this opportunity and looking in the town of Bloomington for a couple years. We find that the location of this building, where it sits within the community, it's a great opportunity for us to put our best foot forward. Just to kind of give you a little bit of parameters, our typical store is between 60 and 70,000 square feet. So this store is a little bit smaller. However, we operate all the way down to 40,000 square feet. We know that in that 50 to 60,000 square feet range, we could bring our best foot forward, which means we can make the best offerings for every community that we go into. And that's our goal for all communities that we enter. As we think about Bloomington and the opportunity to take over this building, which is in a current state of disrepair, we're prepared to invest significant money, multi-million-dollar investment, to completely refurbish the interior and exterior, together with our landlord partner, the exterior and the parking areas. Now, one thing we do know is in order to put our best foot forward, not only with our assortment, but from a service model, is we need to have the right square footage, the right configuration, and the right parking. And in our 85 years of history, we know what works and what doesn't. And currently configured the way that the field is now, it would work perfectly. We're willing to partner with the landlord at this stage and with y'all's support to make modifications, reasonable modifications to the parking field to better serve the community within the confines of what the code requires. So again, that we can maximize this opportunity not only for our shareholders, but more importantly for the community and the individuals in Bloomington. So with that, I want to say thank you for this opportunity. We're honored, we're excited, and we're ready to get started in Bloomington. Thank you.
And I don't know if there's anybody else from the petitioner's team who would like to speak. I don't know how much time there is. There you go.
I'll make it fast.
Okay. Whatever you don't use now, you can use later.
Thank you. So I'm Brian Chandler, and I work in real estate with Academy around the Midwest. I've been here before. We met with planning. We talked about providing.
Sorry, I have to swear you in. My apologies. I'm sorry to interrupt you midstream. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I'm sorry?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I
Thanks.
do.
I was so engaged with what you were saying that I forgot to swear you
Busy being
in. Okay.
truthful.
Please continue.
So I'll make it fast. So we came down, we met with planning, we did provide some data about our other stores and the use of those parking spaces. We can talk about that. We thought that thinking about how to program this parking lot that might achieve some of the goals of Bloomington would be the best path forward for us and for the landlord. And so that is what, those conversations are what's resulted in this plan and what's in front of you. And so we're available to talk about any aspect of this or why we're programming it that way if you'd like. But that this program came from our original meeting with planning here. So just want to say that, and we'll talk about any aspect of it that you'd like. So thank you.
Thanks very much. So back to the board for questions.
Just a quick question for staff. Eric, can you say again, in terms of that adjacent property, how many spaces were available in the one that the petitioner owns as well?
Yep, absolutely. So the adjacent property to the north has approximately 80 spaces over the maximum that would be allowed based on the size of the building that's there. There's 126 parking spaces there, and only 46 is the maximum for that size building. So as I mentioned, these 80 spaces is just slightly less than what they would have to remove on this property to bring it into compliance.
Okay, and then one other quick question. Do we know in terms of what the petitioner is proposing here, in terms of the number of like charging stations? And would that all be allowed under the current UDO, what they have proposed here tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. Electric vehicle charging stations are certainly allowed and required in certain situations when the parking spaces are over a certain number. They aren't excluded. I mean, they're still counted as parking spaces. But they can absolutely convert any or all of the spaces on the site to electric vehicle charging stations. And that would certainly be allowed.
Not in addition to the number that they're allowed to have. So,
Right.
yeah, so the EV, the code doesn't allow for additional spaces if some of them are EV, and they don't allow for, oh, you're going to do ride sharing, that's a use, and you can have 30 spaces for that outside of what code allows.
So just to piggyback, or do you want to follow up?
So just to make sure, so out of the 267, they're saying within these 267, this is what we would propose to allot for. Is that correct?
So yes, from what it sounded like, they were preparing to set aside those, but as Mrs. Scanlon mentioned, those still count towards the on-site number of parking spaces that are allowed.
Thank you.
So I just want to make sure I completely understand. So the ride share parking, if it's leased to a different party or a different entity and it's not going to be utilized by the academy, that still counts against their parking number?
Yes, so we didn't, there is not a ride share exception. Certainly there are lots of locations around Bloomington that offer ride shares within their parking lot, but that still counts as parking against that maximum number. However they want to, if somebody wants to lease their parking spaces, that is completely up to them. But the maximum number of spaces that are allowed on the property are based on the use that is there. So, in this case here, this use as a retail use, it's allowed 169 parking spaces. If the petitioner wants to lease some of those for whatever reason, that's certainly their right, but there is not a separate use of ride share that, gives them additional parking allowance.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And additionally, I'll point out, unless there's more information we haven't heard, there are no agreements here for EV installation or a rideshare contract or any of those things. That all sounds nice in principle. But, sometimes we see people come and request a variance and say, I think it'd be beneficial for these reasons. I'm doing these other things that meet the goals as well. And here is what my plan is to get that done, and that we haven't seen that here. And those items, as Eric said, should be done within the bounds of what code allows for their total spaces.
Okay. Any other questions? No? I would like to ask the petitioner or one of the petitioner's representatives if you would be open to providing a usage study of parking lots of different stores in the manner that we typically see them, in order to demonstrate the actual need for greater parking counts than what our code ratio allows. Could you step to the podium, please?
I think I'm still under oath. So what would that look like? How would that be different than what we provided?
Sure. Maybe Eric would be the best in explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we discussed in some of our preliminary meetings previously, so a parking study would be going out to these locations and doing a count every hour for multiple days, showing the actual number of cars that are in the lot. So it's, it's going to be essential in these situations that it is a standalone lot that is not shared with other businesses, but an actual study showing the number of cars in the lot every hour for multiple days.
So in essence, it demonstrates an actual need on the ground of how many parking spaces are occupied and, what the, during the course of the day or a week. Yeah.
Understand. Thinking about the answer. So the answer is we do track exactly what's coming in and out of our stores and out of our parking lots. The data that we provided is based on that. Now, if it's hourly, that could be provided. It's well known at Academy. I do not have those figures off the top of my head, but those figures, we do know the traffic flow at the stores. I think that data is reflected in the numbers that we provided before. If it wasn't in exactly the format, then we could talk about the format.
Right. So I guess my question is, are you willing to provide the usage study in the format that we typically see it? So that's how we've kind of come to be able to understand collectively that your need is demonstrated.
We'll provide whatever you need. There is a timing issue that I think we'd have to talk about ourselves. Yeah, John, sorry. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling a little bit. I'm thinking about it.
Let's table that. You guys will have an opportunity to add more information in a little while. We're going to go to if anybody has any questions.
I'll direct you to page 1 of the note from them.
Yes.
So this is to the petitioner. So the regional examples, and then it's parenthetically, it says predicted number of peak days. So these numbers that are provided, are these predicted, or are these actual counts that you've done? Is this hard data, or is this predicted data?
Yeah, I think you're looking at the letter that I signed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
yeah.
one?
Yeah, these are illustrative numbers based on these real stores, okay? So I did not commission a traffic study engineer at 3 of these locations. We have 270 locations. We have peak times of the year. If you look at our SEC filings, you can see the fluctuations when it happens during the year. And so we know when we have those peaks and valleys in our customer base and what that does in terms of putting stress on our parking fields.
Actually states 314 parking spaces used for peak days. That's hard data. That's track data, or are you telling us that's what you think? Top one, Terre Haute, Indiana.
Yeah, that's essentially anecdotal. We didn't go out there at that store and measure that, but we did go out there and measure the spots. We have traffic counters, and we know what our customer counts are. So
it's not hard data, but it's anecdotal.
it's anecdotal, but we have 85 years of anecdotal information, and we know what we need to park our stores. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we are going to go to the public now for comment. If there's anybody who here in chambers or online who would like to speak to this petition, this is your opportunity. Please step to the lectern.
If you're in Zoom, you can raise your virtual hand or send a message to the host, and we can get you in line. Thanks.
Okay. If you could just please state your name after you've signed in.
My name's Craig Smith. I represent the dealership to the east of this location. And I had a couple things I'd want to talk about.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Couple things. We want to support the project. The last 6-7 years, it's become a homeless hangout. You can go there any given night. There's tents set up. They're living on the side. They're living in between our space and the location we're talking about. It's just bad business. We've had multiple vandalisms. We've actually had a fire on that property where people had set it on fire. They've also been breaking and entering, stealing stuff out of our cars, because I'm a car dealer. And arsons, I think I said that. Another thing is, as far as EV station, I love the idea of the EV station. We have 4 charging stations at our dealership. Typically on any given day, we have lines out the door waiting to get these cars charged. They drop them off because it typically takes 4 to 6 hours to get you about 40 or 50% charged. They'll drop them off, leave them there. It takes up a lot of our space because we're trying to be nice stewards of the town. So I love the fact that they would be another charging station because there are nothing on this side of town other than our 4 spots. And typically those are meant for us, for our new customers when they buy cars to have it. And along with that, you know, we keep selling more and more EV cars. So as the market keeps growing, we're probably doing close to 10% of our total volume in EV sales on the new car side of it. We expect that to keep growing as the years go by. So in the next couple of years, we could see that going to 20, 25% pretty simple. So it's definitely a must in that situation. Typically, when you were talking about the ride share, if you were to drive through there, typically on any given day, there's 30 to 40 cars parked there. They show up between 6 in the morning and 8 in the morning, and they park there, and they catch either the bus that picks them up right across the street, or they get somebody picks them up and takes them into, I don't know where they're going, I assume in the middle of town, to fight that traffic. So I think that's a good option there to have that availability. I'm just checking my notes here. Yeah, so we are recommending that you guys allow this project to go forward. I've been to Academy Sports in Terre Haute. I went there for around Christmas time to buy some items, and when you guys were talking about parking spots, I don't know how many parking spots are in Terre Haute, but if there's 300, there was 310 cars in the parking spots. We had to park across the street and walk over to get the chance to go shopping in there. So when they were talking about the need for the parking spots, when I was at Terre Haute, I definitely saw the need for that during a Christmas time, which would be, I would consider a peak session. That's all I have.
Thank you. If you could please sign in. Yeah. And state your name.
Steve Akers. I'm a resident of Park Ridge neighborhood, the adjacent neighborhood to this site.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. I guess I'm speaking to this site plan, which I really like the site plan, the way it looks. It seems like it's really broken up the number of parking spaces. My former career before IU was in Kmart Corporation, so I'm familiar with employee parking, et cetera. The EV parking, fantastic. Can't wait to use it, frankly. So that would be great. I think speaking as a Park Ridge resident, and I've talked to many of the residents in Park Ridge, we're anxious to get somebody in this building, not a day longer, due to some items that came up with the housing challenged folks that are in that area. A lot of vandalism. Sorry, Kroger, but a terrible job that Kroger has done on keeping the building in good shape. It's totally overgrown, the bushes, et cetera. So we're really anxious to get Academy Sports and Outdoors into that building. I understand Eric's concern environmentally. I consider myself an environmentalist in terms of heat island, but I'd flip that the other way and say, if we ask the petitioner to remove asphalt, assuming that that asphalt would be transported to the Sycamore landfill via Republic Services in Terre Haute, Indiana, which I've stood on top of. I've taken students there. That's 60 miles away to transport all that asphalt. This seems really unnecessary. Granted, taking out asphalt, creating green space, maybe there's a payoff down the road, but looking at this site plan today, it's well thought out. Granted, a lot of the spaces will be full at, politically correct, the winter break, the Christmas season, et cetera. But I think the way it's broken down with people that are using that site to then transport themselves downtown or to campus, have EV parking, et cetera, I think it's reasonable, the site plan the way it is. I just think it's removing asphalt from a parking lot that already exists. I walk through that lot almost every day to take a peek at the cars in the parking lot. It's kind of fun to look at those cars. And I don't get the sense of I'm walking through a sea of asphalt. I just don't. There's plenty of sidewalks. It's already built in the plan. And it just seems like it's really not necessary. I would rather see it environmentally stay the way it is and then have the site plan put in. It would have less impact in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So I'd like you to consider that. I think it's a reasonable ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the petition?
Hi, I'm Ron Smith, and I'm a neighbor in the Park Ridge area.
Do you swear to or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you. Yeah, over the course of me living in that area, it's since Marsh left, there really has been a kind of a general deterioration of that area. There's been some problems that have been cropping up that I've become aware of, and neighbors have talked to me about it. I realize there are some UDOs come into effect, the ordinance to put forth some of these issues about parking spaces and heat islands, et cetera. So those are all really legitimate things to think about. However, one of the things I think about is there really haven't been too many opportunities to fill that space. So it is just sitting there and not getting any better concerning the neighbors. And so this seems like a really great opportunity. And me, I think of things in a larger sense. It seems like a really great opportunity for us to have this a business. It's going to provide some jobs. It's going to provide some things related to the environment, such as the electronic charging stations. The local businesses are all up. They're all for this. So I would ask you to think about this in a broad way and think that, in general, the good that this is going to do is going to much outweigh the issues of worrying about 90 spaces of parking. I get that there's a regulation with the city that, has an effect on that. But the general idea and the general good that this will be is much beneficial to the area, to the neighbors. It will provide a lot of positive benefits. And I would seriously hate for us to pass up this really great opportunity with some partners who appear to be very willing to do some good things. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody further who'd like to speak to this petition? If you could state your name.
Tom Orman.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
As I'm sitting here looking at the possible future tenant and the landlord, it looks like they came up with some brilliant ideas. The asphalt's been there since, what year? 91. Okay, we've got a great opportunity to keep the homeless out of an area that they're quite frequently frequenting. It looks like the tenant, the future possible tenant, which I don't know, has offered some solutions. The rideshare parking, the EV charging, which I had a Tesla, had a real nice Tesla. My wife loved it. We sold it. There's not enough EV parking in Bloomington. The former landlord has a Tesla charging station at Fresh Time, which has brought a lot of good to the community because that's where we charged at. I'm not sure what charging system you're looking at, but it's a needed thing, especially on the east side of town. We did sell our vehicle because I don't think the charging stations were frequent enough. The car dealer guy done a great job speaking of that. So anyway, I don't know what more you could ask for a possible tenant to come to our town in a vacant store that has existing parking since 1991, and they're offering all these great benefits to you guys. The rideshare parking is brilliant. They're saying we're giving up something to help the community. And we're actually investing in EV parking that we already have on the west side of town. So I commend them. And I think I'm fully in support of it, and I think most people here are fully in support of it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Will you please sign in?
Yes. My name is Rajesh Patel.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
5 minutes.
Well, we are here to support. We are in hospitality industries, also we are in retail industries, and we know the value of parking lots. And with the IU game schedule, there are many weekends, parent comes from out of town and they request us that, hey, can we park here and we can go to the ball game or somewhere in the college. Without having any business with us, they still request. So the shared parking idea is wonderful. You know, we are with that. It's very, very good. The EV parking, it's more important also in the future industries. You know, many companies will say in a few years that they're going to stop making gas vehicles. So EV parkings, it's needed. Earlier there was someone mentioned about that tent and also homeless people when they are looking for the place to sleep. And closed business are not looking good at all. We had one project at Rogers and Country Club. It was eyesore. Many customers, even after 3 years we opened the store, they still tell us that thank you for doing that improvement. It was not looking good at all for many, many years. And we are here to support this idea, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hi, my name is William Arnold.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, thanks.
I'm a general dentist. I have my office in the shops at Kingston. So looking out my front door, I've looked at the empty building for the 6 years it's been empty. I haven't seen the site plan until tonight, but I think it looks great. I think that we need to have this site developed as quickly as possible, really. I'm going to echo a lot of the things we've already heard. It's been a derelict building. Kroger has put nothing into taking care of it. Having homeless people out in front of my office has been a detriment. A year ago, we had a little excess parking in front of my shop. We don't have that anymore. We have a busy almost fully occupied parking lot all the time now. So I think that Academy needs the spots that they've talked about on their data, and there's not going to be any overflow available in front of my office. I think if Academy is as busy as they've said, then that's going to restrict what we need also. And so I'm all for this project. I'd like to see it happen. I understand the other concerns. I echo Steve Akers' environmental concerns, but hope it happens. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Chris Cockrum.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
5 minutes.
First, I'd like to thank the landlord for your investment in our community, which has been big. And also, I'd like to thank Academy Sports for your interest in looking to invest in our community. So I just really appreciate that, and I love that your interest in our community. I support the petitioner's request, and I ask that you approve this variance. First, I don't agree with the findings. It says that it's injurious to public health, safety, and moral to the community. And I don't agree. The building was built to code when it was first developed. And the only thing that's changed is it was vacant. And because of the economy, we had the Great Recession of '08. Unfortunately, Marsh, closed. And it's a big space to fill. It's not an easy space to fill. And so just because it's vacant and because it was built to code originally, we're asking them to bring it up to code today, which is just a big added cost for either the tenant or the landlord, an unneeded cost. Sometimes it could be $50,000 to $100,000 it could add to a project. Would not surprise me. And also, this is also a resource that's already there. I served on the Historic Preservation Commission, and not that this is historic, but something that we heard a lot was not do away with resources that have already been put into a project. So this is already there, and it's not like they're asking for additional parking. It's just like utilize the parking that's already existing. So being a local commercial real estate broker, something that I struggle with is when you have a new tenant with a permitted use, and then they're not changing anything, it's zoned right, and you're asking for a code review. And I just feel like it's not like they're adding on to the building or any additional construction. It's just a new tenant with a permitted use. So it's just something personally I don't like about the code. I'll just mention that to you guys. And so the last thing I'll say is vacant space is not good for a community. As a community, we need to work with landowners and to help fill the space and not put up hurdles. And so again, I just ask that you approve this variance. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Could you please sign in? Did you want to share something with us?
I have copies of the letter I'm going to read.
Okay. Great. If you could just state your name.
Amanda Thompson.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, 5 minutes.
Okay. I am representing the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. They weren't available to be here tonight. This one. Okay. It says, Dear BMZ members, I hope this letter finds you well. I write to you today to offer the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce support for the maximum vehicle parking allowance variance requested by Academy Sports and Bryan Rental, Inc. and Crane of Indiana, LLC. We believe that Academy Sports could be a vital asset to the Bloomington community, filling a gap in the sporting goods market, creating jobs, and bringing a vacant storefront to life once again. We urge you to accept the requested variance. We feel that supporting this variance is a common sense idea, as the parking already exists and is appropriately sized for this retail operation. While the Chamber supports the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, and believes that parking standards are a valuable tool for managing growth in our community, we believe that any good plan should be nimble and allow for flexibility when it's in the community's best interest. As it stands, the UDO allows large retailers to provide 3.3 parking spaces for every 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. Based on these guidelines, Academy Sports can only provide 169 parking spaces for both customers and employees. At their 270 stores nationwide, typical peak weekend parking requires more than 228 parking spaces. This results in a gap of nearly 60 spaces. Furthermore, during the peak shopping months of November and December, parking utilization can reach up to 295 spaces. Such constraints would prevent Academy from being able to adequately serve their customers and could have detrimental effects on safety and surrounding parking, such as customers parking on adjacent lots, creating a domino effect of parking shortages and difficulty in all affected business in being able to properly serve their customers. Cars circling around the parking lot. This can be a hazard to people walking in and out of the stores while cars are maneuvering around to look for a spot and cause unnecessary carbon emissions. Backups will burden Kingston shops and limit access to vital services like DaVita dialysis. As these examples show, a lack of adequate parking could lead to safety concerns and have a negative impact on business. We believe an effective community plan must allow for flexibility to suit the needs of our community so that it may grow and prosper. We firmly believe that a variance in this matter would allow Bloomington to attract a top sporting goods retailer, fill a gap in the market, employ residents, and revitalize a vacant commercial space. These are all worthy goals to strive for, and we kindly ask for your permittance of this variance. Thank you in advance for your consideration. Director of Advocacy, Christopher Emge.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dave Harstad.
Do you swear to tell the truth or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you for your time. I'd like to make three site-specific arguments in favor of the petition, and then I'd also like to make some general comments about the state of the market and the need for parking. So first, I think it's worth noting that this site is an edge. There's a commercial trade area. Immediately to the east, we transition immediately to single-family homes. We have consistently heard, we've had a lot of changes in policy and land use policy in Bloomington. We want density, we won't want density, we want parking, we don't want parking. I'm certain the pendulum will swing again, and in the future, we will change our parking ordinances. I'm 100% sure of it. Everyone here understands climate crisis. I think that there's some legitimate disagreement that this is actually, and I'd love to see some data. You know, you're asking for data about parking. I'd like to see some data about whether this actually advances climate goals that we all agree are important. Having said that, this is an edge, and I think there's always been consistent agreement that keeping commercial uses separate from single-family uses is important. And so we want a buffer, we want sufficient parking, so that those uses, those trucks, those whatevers don't spill out into the adjacent neighborhood. We want to keep a segregation of land uses. That's number one. Number two, the argument that's frequently made by staff in support of parking maximums is that there are parking garages downtown or there's on-street parking, et cetera. It doesn't exist here. There is no on-street parking on 3rd Street. There's no on-street parking on Longview, et cetera. And so it's important to note that the parking that is going to be used by this user is going to be in this parking field and in this parking field alone. We don't want it to spill into the neighborhood. We want it to be in this parking field. I'm certain it won't be full every day. It never is, but it is important to have sufficient parking for this use. The user knows, the user should be respected. Lastly, I think that the specific use requires parking. And by that I mean, you're not going to take a bus and buy a weight set or a treadmill, et cetera, from a sporting goods company. You are going to take a vehicle there. You may even bring a vehicle with a trailer. You may bring a box truck. And so having sufficient access for vehicles is important. And so those are my 3 site-specific arguments in favor of this. More broadly, I'm a broker here in Bloomington, and I consistently hear, and I'd be happy to give a tour to any of you, any staff, any activist who's anti-parking. I'll be happy to show you any number of buildings around town where I've given up a listing because I've heard so consistently from occupiers that it just doesn't work from a parking and loading standpoint. And so, yes, we do need to think about some of these climate goals. We want to encourage transit, et cetera, but forcing bad design that results in empty buildings is not good public policy. And so, big picture here, we've got empty buildings. Our economy is not going in the right direction. We don't want more empty buildings. Whether we like it or not, having sufficient parking is an important part of retail in general and this particular user in particular. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Craig Cowden.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, 5 minutes.
You know, I saw this in the paper and I got real excited. We have an empty building and it's like we're going to have somebody move into it. And I thought, we're not going to build a new building. We're going to use a building that already exists. Then I started reading, I'm like, we want to turn it down because of 80 parking spaces. Well, if they would have built a brand new building, it's going to put a lot more blacktop on the ground. So that's why I decided to come talk, because I thought we really need to do this because it's an empty building and we're filling it up. We're not building something new. We're using what we already have. The parking lot's already there. And I'm sitting here listening. I thought, well, we want more bicycles. Well, they're going to sell bicycles. And maybe they'll give, because I know sometimes Dick's runs out of bicycles. I've been there, they don't have any bicycles. So maybe there are more bicycles, more people buy bicycles and ride. And then we talked about the parking. Well, you guys have been to the mall around Christmas, haven't you? That parking lot is totally full. And so they're needing the parking for their big times of the year, so I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak to the petition at the moment? Okay, the person on Zoom, if you'd like to go ahead and state your name.
You should be able to unmute, Ms. Mills.
Yes, I'm Ellen Mills. I live on Longview, right behind this project.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. I know this site well. I used to shop at Service. I used to shop at Marsh. It was a wonderful grocery store before they finally went belly up. I've watched Marsh deteriorate since it's been the Marsh building, since it's been empty. I see graffiti, I see the parking lots, and there's actually a fair amount of landscaping deteriorate too for lack of use. And we really, really need a business. I also use Kingston regularly, so I get to see this on my way by. And I'm puzzled by some of the comments that were said by staff in the very beginning about the sea of asphalt and it not being friendly to buses and bicycles and stuff. It has sidewalks, usable sidewalks. In fact, I have my car serviced at Royal East. I use the sidewalk coming to and fro. There's a bus right on Kingston. This would go well with the project. And Longview has bike lanes and has lots of bicycles. So it seems like a really good thing to me. I'm also concerned because I was gone from Bloomington for a while. And when I came back in 2017, I saw some changes, and changes that concern me because there are lots of empty storefronts, especially here on the east side. Have an awful big dead part of the mall at Macy's. And we really do need a tenant. And I'm concerned that we as a community are sounding unfriendly to a new business that is willing to partner with us and do so much, especially so much stuff that's pointing towards the future, all for the sake of parking places, which are already there and have been there since '91. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Nope. Okay. Then we are back to the petitioner. I believe you have some remaining time. If there are any further comments or any other information you'd like to bring forward at this time, this is your opportunity.
For just one point of clarification, there was discussion, and I'm not sure I follow the logic, but as to the 80-some parking spots that may be available on the adjacent property, which is also owned by one of the owners of this property. And I'm unclear as to how that would play into your decision this evening, but you should be aware of a couple of things, that there are active buildings within the Kensington shops. One of them is a dialysis center. And certainly you don't expect those folks to have to park, hundreds of feet or yards away and walk to their dialysis treatment. The other thing is that there is a reciprocal easement agreement in place between these two commercial uses that allows the facility that Academy wishes to occupy a total of 10 spaces in Kensington shops. So Dr. Arnold and the dialysis center and these tenants and their customers, their patients, have a legal right to enforce that, so that if there is overflow parking from Academy from one location, that is from the Academy space to the Kensington shops, there is a legal mechanism to prevent that. So the notion that there's 80, I'm just concerned that there was an impression that there are 80 spaces available potentially to customers of Academy because they're on an adjacent business is, it was confusing to me, so I thought I would just comment and clear up any confusion if there is among the board members.
Thank you. Is there time remaining? Oh, yeah, please, by all means.
Thank you. I just wanted to circle back to, there was a question, I think, ma'am, about undertaking a study. What I want to say is, we are prepared to come to Bloomington. Second-gen space, there's numerous studies out there across the United States, and every major or minor metropolitan area is at a 10 or 15-year low. We did a lot of homework, and we still believe that this is a great opportunity for us. And we're making a lot of compromises because, like I said, it's not our standard size. We're already in for permit. We're already committed and have committed significant financial resources towards this project. And we'd like to start swinging hammers and get under construction as quickly as possible. If you ask me to undertake a study and do that today, it's not going to yield anything fruitful, particularly because it's not one of our peak times. One of the other gentlemen said it, during Thanksgiving, November, Christmas, and quite frankly into January, we've got people that are picking up grills, they're picking up these 12-foot boats called John boats, they're picking up full weight sets, things like that. So the timing wouldn't work. As a proposed tenant here, I want to resolve it today, because if we can't do that, I would say that from our side, it puts the program at risk for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are back to the board for any further questions of staff, or if somebody ready to.
Sure. This will go to staff.
Okay.
Second paragraph, Eric, of your report, since the previous use within the building was removed and the building has been vacant for more than 12 months, the establishment of any use is considered a change in use. From that statement, if this petitioner had come to do this development within the 12 months, they wouldn't have to go through a request. They would have been able to keep the spaces. Is that correct?
Let me check real quick and make sure that a grocery, supermarket, and retail sales large are in the same use category. Assuming that they are, then yes, that statement would be correct. Give me just one second. Yes, that is correct. They are in the same use category. So if they would have come forward within that 1 year time frame, this would not be an item for discussion.
Okay. So I just want to make it clear for those that are here so that if they had come forward, wanted to do this development within 12 months of the marsh having closed, we wouldn't be having this discussion at all.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Quickly. Just in response to Mr. Dinsford's confusion, something we usually talk about here in these types of variances, and I think Eric did a good job covering it, but just to clarify again, and Mr. Harstad mentioned it, but not all of it, which is something that we look at is, are there opportunities for public parking near the use? Are there opportunities for street parking near the use? And are there opportunities for shared parking near the use? So when Mr. Grulich is mentioning that this particular property owner also owns an adjacent property with parking, that's why he's mentioning that. Whether or not this property owner has agreements on this site or the other site that preclude, that make it hard for them to do what they want to do on the property, that's not really this board's, that's not something to weigh, I don't think, or, that's kind of not what we were getting at, I think. Just that there appears to be opportunity for shared parking with two properties owned by the same person.
I do have a question of staff, and that is, how do we understand seasonal parking kind of loads and sort of how our UDO guides us to look at how we scale parking to businesses?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so the parking standards that we have in our code, they're not just arbitrary numbers. When we went through the updates to the zoning code and looked at parking maximums, we looked at standards across the country. At communities and zoning codes throughout the country of the standards and the numbers that they used. So we don't provide parking based on your one-time maximum use, your Christmas season. We look at parking based on your typical use throughout the course of the year. Because when you park for just that one busy time of year, you're going to have most of your parking sitting empty for most of the year. So that results in all of these negative consequences that our parking maximums are trying to accomplish, which are, reducing the amount of excess asphalt that's just sitting there, creating this perception that there will always be parking anywhere you want and there's parking available all the time, which decreases your likelihood to use alternative transportation. So, these are things that were embedded in our comprehensive plan, and our UDO was written to promote those. So there are requirements that when a property, it's been developed prior to the current code, that's great, it's grandfathered, but there are going to be situations that you have to bring it into compliance with our current standards. So, those standards, and certainly as the board probably is aware of this, have been very heavily discussed at the Planning Commission and City Council level. And these are the standards that are in place. When somebody wants to come forward with a parking maximum, and certainly the board has seen several of those, there have been demonstrated parking studies brought forward showing a need. Not just here's the availability of parking based on communities that have no parking maximums, but here is the need that is specific to this use and how it relates to this particular property. So the numbers and the standards in the zoning code, they're not arbitrary. They've been very well vetted and thought out and decided by the policymakers. And certainly, as the board knows, their role is to demonstrate or show when there has been a unique condition met that a use is different and has a need that can't meet the parking standards. Just looking anecdotally at some of the adjacent properties, Kroger, Dick's, very similar size store, have parking within our parking maximums. They've got the burden of proof is on the petitioner to show that this use is different, and they've got a need that is different, unique to them. So that is where our struggle has been and why we did not recommend approval of this, because no information has been given. When I met with the petitioner over a month and a half ago, I told them to prepare a parking study showing a demonstrated need. So they've had time to put together that information. As they indicated, now is not that peak time. Their peak time is Christmas, and that's not the season that we're aiming for. That's not the standard that things are based on, is what's your one-time maximum use.
Thank you, Eric. Any other questions? Any other questions? I have a follow-up question, please, for the petitioner. If you could please step to the microphone. I just want to make sure I understood. So you have begun the permitting process, and if there isn't a favorable decision this evening, you feel as if that's an unworkable solution. If we were to ask for the backup information, you basically provided kind of a summary, and it sounds like you have the data. If you could provide that data, you would not be amenable to a continuance, so that we would have the demonstrable information in front of us, as we have had for a number of other scenarios when these kinds of situations come before us.
Yeah, so I think what I understood earlier was if you wanted us to undertake, hire a traffic engineer and do a study like that, what I'm saying is that will put this, the timing's not going to work. And I know the gentleman who just spoke said, the code isn't designed for one time a year, but how would you all feel if you're going to come to our store at Thanksgiving, back to school, July 4th, before tailgates, and you can't get a parking spot, and so for us, it is important, I think we view this as the parking spots are there, right? And like I said, the box itself isn't ideal. I know I'm not answering your question, I will in a moment. So the timing wouldn't work. I would be willing, to confer with council. I can't give you that answer now, but what I am saying is overall, if this is going to be a lengthy process that goes on, I was hoping to come here, came in from Houston this morning. I was hoping to come here with a result that says we can go forward as planned, because we are in for permits. We've made financial commitments towards the materials that we need for the building, and I'd like to get, we'd like to get moving. If there's some additional level of data that I can provide, and we can, do that quickly, but if it's going to go, we got to come back in 30 or 45 days, then I would say it does put the transaction at risk for us.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sure, please. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you may.
And this goes back to the issue of Kroger and what would have happened if the petitioner would have come forward on day one. The reason that nothing has happened since Marsh closed is because Kroger bought their lease. This is an issue with Kroger. They bought their lease. They were happy to sit in this dark building. We came to the landlord a couple of years ago. I know that other retailers have come previous to that. Kroger has never been willing to give up this lease. There is a deal on the table that Kroger is willing to sign tonight. That is the urgency. It's part of the urgency on our part. In order to have a 2024 store, we need to be progressing with these permits. And it's also the issue with the landlord, because Kroger is in control of the building today. So anyway.
Thank you. Okay, so we're back to the board for any further discussion or?
Well, I'm prepared to make a motion, but before I make that motion, I wanted to just make a couple of statements as to why I'm going to make that motion, okay? So the first thing is, if I've left this conversation correctly, and just please, one of you correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of the planned EV parking and charging and the rideshare parking, I do want it to be clear that those are ideas, those are thoughts, those are suggestions. Those are not things that are hard and fast, so they could very well not happen. And I understand that, and I just want to make sure that that's clear. If I'm misrepresenting you, right now these are ideas, but you don't have any deals on the table that that is an actual part of the development.
Are you asking a question?
I guess I am now. I ask if I was wrong, I want to be corrected.
Dave Kamen.
State your name.
Dave Kamen.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the
Yes.
truth? Okay, please answer the question.
Number one is I brought the first, I believe it's the first EV charging station to Bloomington, Indiana with the Tesla facility at the West Side Fresh Time. So I don't know if there's any more now, but I actually did that. Nobody asked me to. I thought it was the right thing to do. And at first it wasn't used much. Now it's used a lot, a lot. If you go out there, the other thing is, well,
My question is it something that is going to happen, or is it something you want to happen?
the rideshare thing we'll commit to. You can make that as a condition. We will commit to dedicate that spot, not with the city of Bloomington. I think Tom Dansford might have not conferred that we'll operate it, put the signs up, and we'll commit during the term of the academy lease to provide that space for ride share. It's the right thing to do. We have some form of that now, as you know. The parking lot's about half full now, and Kroger's, even though they leased it, and you know, I appreciate them, and I've got nothing bad to say about Kroger. I wish that when they took over the lease, they would have opened the store. I asked them several times. I said, you know, why don't you?
I just want to really get to the point of those two issues. I appreciate the comments, but you're saying that you would actually commit to doing that rideshare. My question then for the planned EV is, that is still something that you're saying we'd like to do it, but is not something that's definitely going to.
Arrangements for it.
That's all I'm asking
Yeah,
is-
we need approval, but the rideshare, we will commit during the term of the academy lease to provide signage and so forth for rideshare there. So that, you're welcome to make that as a condition. We will abide by that.
I'm not going to do that. I just want to make sure that I was understanding it correctly. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because my comment before I make a motion is, this would have been a much stronger petition if you had come forward and said, we've already made a deal. This goes through, this is part of our plan, it's going to happen. That's my only comment, is that would have been really strong. Offers and ideas are one thing, but it's just a proposal. I just want to make sure we're clear going forward that that's your desire, that's your hope, but in 2-3 years, we could certainly drive by there and none of that's happening. Okay, and if you want to do that, that's great, but as it stands now, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly. And you've explained it to me, that's terrific, so thank you.
Transactional attorney works with Tesla, and why don't you say, you've been sitting here, get up and say a couple words about the Tesla thing. And
Excuse me, I think the question has been answered.
The
Thank
question
you.
has been answered, and that's terrific, and as the petitioner said, if they want to attach that, that's great. But I'm only doing this to make sure it's on the record that we all understand that that is not part of this plan going forward. All right, if you do it, great. Okay, that was the one thing. Now, the second thing is, we are required by our charge to come up with a peculiar instance or an unusual circumstance as to why we would grant this. We can't just say, oh, it's a great idea, we love it. Every one of us up here could love the idea, but we have to have a reason to go against code. All right, so that's why I'm asking that question. But I will say that what is unusual to me, before I make the motion, are two things. One is that if you had come forward right after Marsh had closed, within a 12-month period, we wouldn't be here. To me, that's a compelling argument. That is backed up by my second point, which is Kroger was holding this up. I understand that they own the lease and they were not really receptive to signing a lease for this type of thing until now, okay? So those are two things that could be seen as peculiar, could be, or could be argued. That's it. Okay. And we can then argue that. So with that, I was going to make the motion to grant the variance 2723.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Okay.
And
so
then I understand
discussion.
there may be some issues with those two things.
Okay, I will just say that the UDO, the provision for anything in the city, that if a use is discontinued for 12 months, and that applies to any piece of property, we may not like it, we may not agree with it, we may want to change it, but that happens to be our law right now. And it doesn't just simply apply to this property. In fact, our own office, we made significant investments because of having to meet planning's requirements for partial plan, compliance, and it was costly, and it was because the property had sat empty for 12 months. And yeah, and that's just kind of the part of the landscape here at the moment. So I can't agree with that first part. I think this is a really tough one because we all want to see this property that is underutilized, utilized well, and be put back in use and be well cared for and a destination. There's no question about that. So I'm wrestling with this because I have also heard a lot of cases where we have asked our petitioners for something very specific, and they have provided that information. And as a result of that, we have been able to give them a variance that they were requesting. In this case, we're asking for almost 100 more parking spaces than our code currently allows. It is not a marginal amount. So I'm finding this really hard because I desperately want to see this business come to Bloomington. I'm going to throw out another idea, and that is on the statement that was provided by Academy, they say that on their typical peak utilization, which occurs on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, their parking spaces are approximately, their needs are approximately 228 parking spaces. And I am in agreement generally with the way that our code does frame the holidays as being a kind of an exceptional time. And yes, we do have busy weekends, granted. But keeping that in mind, I'm wondering if there could not be another number that is suggested by the data that they have presented that is perhaps not the full amount. In fact, that's an additional 39 spaces.
Wouldn't we still though have to have we'd still have to have a rationale for that? Or,
Definitely,
and what would that be?
We would cite, is it possible for us to ask, the petitioner says they have the data to support their numbers. Is it possible to ask, and I'm asking Mike Rooker, the attorney, to ask for that backup information? Can we do it as a condition of approval?
You wouldn't typically do that as a condition of approval. You would want the evidence to be presented before you would make your findings in a case. So that would be a little bit unusual to say. I suppose you could do a condition of approval requiring the petitioner to submit something to you, but I might recommend that if that's going to form the basis for a finding, that you have the evidence in front of you before you issue the finding.
Sure, I understand. So that's why I was asking about the continuance, so that you can provide us the information so that we can grant you the number that you demonstrate is necessary. Okay, so that was my other thought.
Yeah, and certainly you could also throw into that, like if they had a definite agreements that said we're going to do this with the EV and the rideshare. That to me takes off something like 60 spaces. And that's why I said it would be a stronger petition, but,
So I agree with that. I agree with that because I think in looking at so you know, looking at Bloomington and what holes there are in our networks, I think that obviously this parking lot is serving, you know, as a rideshare now, and, you know, I think there could be some evidence for that. Yeah, but I think we're a little shy.
Yeah. But I do go to the second part of that, which is I'm struggling with how Kroger has pretty well mucked it up, you know? And I just think that's the one thing that's allowing me to feel like there is some leeway, but, you know, an argument can be made, and I could change my mind.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other ideas in terms of if we were to vote for this, what would be our alternate findings of fact?
Yeah, I think, to me, the alternative findings of fact are laid out in page 10 and 11 from the petitioner already. The reasons why this should be approved, they've specifically outlines all the rationale. Item number 3, the strict application of the UDO will result in practical difficulties. To me, the crux of that is the window of opportunity that this is within, and I feel like it's a small one, especially if you have a corporation like Kroger that you're dealing with who's willing to negotiate on this lease. That's the opportunity that I feel like putting this out any further, risking an opportunity of a business like this to come in to make the impact they want. I think they've laid it out very, very well as to their reasons why they need the approval. And the crux of that, to me, why I will support it, is because Kroger's willing to deal right now. Without Kroger, if you go to another tenant potentially, which is a big risk on everybody's side, what if they aren't? Then, to me, that's a huge opportunity wasted.
Okay. Any other comments?
Can I make a comment to the petitioner?
You have a question?
Not a question, a comment.
Sure, you can do whatever you want.
I just want it noted how important this community has expressed, how interested they clearly want the EV chargers to be brought to this area, not just Tesla. I think an investment in our community is not just excluding all EV owners, like not just Tesla. We need other EV charging stations, and several of the people that spoke tonight and online really made it clear that is a want and something that is warranted. So I really hope that you will make the commitment to putting in those EV chargers, because that's a big part of this. Big part of the support that you've gathered in the community is those EV chargers. That's all.
Madam President, so since the motion that I made doesn't include a significant additional finding, am I allowed to withdraw it? Yes, you can withdraw it. Okay, I will withdraw the motion and let the board make another motion if they so choose.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to, I guess, can I say adopt the petitioner's proposed findings and approve V-27-23, citing pages 10 and 11 from the petitioner's statement.
Possible to put that up on the screen.
Summarize, maybe. Mike, what did you say?
I asked
To put 'em
Jackie if
up?
she could put it on the screen.
Oops.
Couple things. Was there a second? And also, were there conditions for that?
Did I have a second? I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And are there additional conditions conditions of approval that you want to add to the motion?
Right. Can we add that this would be attached to the proposal that they have with the commitment.
Do you want to go ahead and, do you want to put up, I mean, yeah, we think if you're going to approve it, you should, you know.
That has to be, right.
Yeah,
So
so
I would
I'm trying to, listen to some of the comments, and balance, the things that we addressed in our findings. So in our findings, we talked about some of the impacts, from the excess asphalt, and, the reasons why the code doesn't allow those. So I've tried to come up with some conditions of approval that mitigate those, to balance what feels like might be some balance between the number of spaces on the site and bringing the site closer to compliance. So leaving all of the parking spaces on the site results in almost literally no improvements to the property whatsoever. We don't get any additional green space. We don't get any sidewalk connections from the building to the street. We get absolutely nothing. So I've tried to come up with some conditions of approval here that address some of the concerns that we raised in our staff report. So I'm just going to briefly go through some of these to make sure that everybody understands, and it's certainly up to the board if they want to adopt any of these within their recommendation. So condition 1 is that the petitioner shall work with staff to install landscaping to the maximum extent possible. Number 2, parking spaces within the lot shall be arranged to meet the UDO landscaping requirements of not more than 10 spaces without an island. So that is a current standard within the zoning code, that you can't have more than 10 spaces in a row without an island, with a tall canopy tree in it. Also, in other situations where parking maximum or variances from parking maximums have been granted, we've required those parking spaces over the maximum to be impermeable pavers to help offset the increased runoff as a result of the asphalt. And then the fourth one here, since the petitioner has not provided any demonstrated need or study, this condition says that a study shall be submitted annually for 5 years showing a monthly need. So that gives them the opportunity, at their opportunity, to conduct this study that they would submit to us, that we would then evaluate to see if there is a continued demonstrated need and come back to the board if some of these spaces are not being used and can be removed. So one of the other issues that I raised with excess asphalt and parking on a property is it discourages and is a hindrance to pedestrian accessibility to a building from the street. So condition 5 says a sidewalk connection from 3rd Street to the building shall be provided through the site somehow. We're happy to work with them to come up with the specifics of that. Number 6 is that a minimum 5-foot tree plot and 6-foot sidewalk are required along Kingston Drive. There is a tree plot for a portion of that, but it is missing. So this would guarantee that we have a tree plot and sidewalk along there. And then number 7 is that, and I believe this number came from the petitioner's previous map and plan, is that a minimum of 37 electric vehicle charging stations are required. So those are the conditions that I have worked up and are proposing, and are certainly able to be incorporated if the board wishes to adopt any of them.
For 8 there, also from their drawing, that a minimum of 26 ride share parking spaces will be set aside.
Did you say 24? I'm sorry.
Sorry, 26 ride shares, what they're showing.
Is that signed? How is that typically?
Part of the problem, right, that we're facing is like, it's fine for them to say, I mean, they're asking for a variance and they're showing that they're saying that in other locations, they need 300 parking spaces. But then they're saying here, we'll be fine with 164, but we're gonna have this extra 100 doing these other duties. Well, is it, or are you, it's just customer parking? So it's fine to say that they're setting these aside, but what mechanisms do we actually have to make sure that it's not just excess customer parking? I mean, how does the 164 they've proposed here meet the needs that they've supposedly showed at the other locations of 300 spaces? It doesn't make any sense. The total here gets close to that need, but not what they're purporting to use as customer parking. It's not anywhere near. So ride share parking, EV parking, I mean, it's just all customer parking, and it's in a large excess of the code allowance. So that's up to you all. If you think that there's a way to, actually bollard off or block off those 26 rideshare spaces, do you want to put in here that they have to have an agreement? Like Mr. Throckmorton said, if they had come in and said, we have an agreement with Zipcar and we're going to have 26 Zipcars at this location and we have an agreement, with whoever and we will have 36 electric, that makes sense. But now we are charged with figuring out how to make sure that this happens. And that's just not really something we do on a daily basis or.
I also just want to explain that with partial site plan compliance, there are a number of other provisions that you have to meet with landscaping, and there are other goals that are embedded in the UDO that have to be dealt with. So what Eric is trying to do by introducing all of these are things that happen as a result of taking away more asphalt. So still trying to get the value and the good stuff in the investment in upgrading the parking area and making it much more pedestrian friendly while allowing them as much parking.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to the recommendations. I think that's an interesting place to start for sure. And I understand, of course, the whole idea of upgrading. I still am trying to balance it with what would have happened if this had happened within 12 months. I mean, I'm still balancing it.
But that's any property. I mean, the reality is if this business wanted to build a new building somewhere, they would be limited to what's allowed in the UDO.
I understand if they were building a building somewhere, but they're not.
So
that's the issue that I'm having but they're not.
Right.
And we're looking at a building that exists and has material. I agree with what Jackie was saying, which is it is interesting when you look at, hey, we're going to take these spaces away, you kind of get back to where we are. That's why I was saying it would be a stronger petition if it had come in and said, okay, but here's what we want to do with those extra spaces and turn it over for other use. So, adding those as recommendations, going from this idea of this is what we'd love to do to putting them into the recommendations, I think that's great. It's just a matter of codifying what it is they said they're willing to do. I have no issues with that.
So can I ask, in terms of the annual reporting for 5 years, what happens? Does it get revisited in 5 years?
Right, and that's part of the problem of doing this type of thing on the fly, right? So Eric, did you have an idea? I mean, I think Eric's idea, based on what he said, but not what written here, is that if there was not a demonstrated need annually, we would come back to you and say, is that even something we can do? Come back and, I'm not sure. That may have to be a zoning commitment signed by the petitioner.
If you want to make it a condition of approval, and I'm sorry to belabor this petition, that you write in precisely what the intended consequences of the condition that the board is imposing are, or what you plan to do with those annual reports. I do agree that by itself, as written right now, it simply requires a submission of the report. The contents of the report are irrelevant, so.
Right.
I'll just reiterate for those watching, I'm sure there are people at home watching, what Mrs. Clapper said, it is unfortunate. First of all, we don't know anything about the Kroger agreement. They have indicated that there's a Kroger agreement and that's why the building's vacant. That seems logical. There is no one here from Kroger indicating that that is the case. Whether or not that's true, the 12-year agreement the 12-month agreement applies across the city. If we don't think that's appropriate, then we should propose to change that. That is a policy question. And, some comments were made by members of the public. This isn't what we want to, is this the kind of policy we want? This body doesn't do policy. We're looking at whether or not this property has unique characteristics that mean that it cannot be used within the zoning code. And if you decide that that's true, that's fine. But then we should also think about, if the crux of approving this is that you think that the 12 years, or I'm so sorry, that the 12 months is too much or overburdensome, then that's a policy question, and we should take that up with Plan Commission and Council. which we've talked about before with other, when we've had other variances that really come down to whether or not we agree that the policy makes sense. That's not really what this board is to be looking at.
Very quickly, the current motion pending before the board does not include any conditions of approval. So if you want to add conditions, either Commissioner Ballard is going to have to amend his motion and have it reseconded, or withdraw the motion and start over again. Either process is fine, but.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm willing to add the conditions, as long as, I feel like this needs to be a conversation with the petitioners, though, that if they're willing to do these things. I mean, to me, this is, yeah, I don't know. To me, I feel like this is making it more complicated. I think the purview, I understand the purview. I think the part about if they came in here with concrete evidence of having agreements with rideshare, that's like, to me, there's no guarantee if they had those agreements, what if they don't get the approval? Well, then they're locked into an agreement that for something they're not going to receive. So I don't.
It's like a letter of intent. We see those all the time in other petitions where Zipcar says, if you do this, we are willing to do this. They're just saying, oh, this sounds like a nice idea. People already park here. And again, if that is enough, if your threshold is that that's enough, that's fine. I just am saying that I think staff agrees with Mr. Throckmorton. We understand that they're under a time crunch. It's self-imposed, right? It doesn't have anything to do with the City of Bloomington or the Planning and Transportation Department or the Board of Zoning Appeals. They want to open by a certain time. They started at a certain time. Our due diligence takes the amount of time that it takes, and they didn't start it early enough apparently for their end date. So we just kind of are at a loss. So we were, what I think the point is, if it was more fleshed out with actual intents of service, that would probably make us feel better. But I mean, conditions, as you want to put them, are obviously also appropriate.
I would say that, I would strike number 4, because I just think that that's, if people are going to vote for this, then we're going to vote, you were going to vote for it, and you're not going to be looking back.
Sure.
Yeah.
The only other, I did have a question for Eric. Where did we get 37 electric charging stations? Is that a formula?
Map.
That's what they proposed? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that number. I'll go back to what I was saying, is that I just think that this is a nice compromise, because it does allow there to be some structure to this variance. And it's an odd and difficult thing, this particular petition. And I particularly agree with what Jackie just went through about the timing and everything. And we're doing our best in order to try to accommodate that. And this is one way that maybe we could get there.
Yeah. These are all provisions that would need to be met otherwise. I mean, this is nothing other than number 4.
Yeah. If there was a continuance, they'd have to, yeah.
Yeah,
These
I
are
mean,
the
they would
types of-
still need to, yeah, they would still need to meet that. So I think that would.
So, but to be clear, we could make this motion and we could add these conditions. The petitioner doesn't have to do it. This is just us saying, if you want to move forward, here's our request.
Right.
To move forward, you would need that, so. I think we're.
Excuse me? If you want to step to the party. Does somebody from the team want to respond to the conditions? That's fine.
So Brian Chandler, again, I think what we would suggest making part of our commitment in return for approval is committing to the ride share. And I think we came prepared to commit to that as well as we knew how to, but we are proposing to make that a condition. That is a ride share. It can be programmed by the city, it can be programmed by us, it could be as simple as signage, there could be advertising, but whatever that is, we will make that commitment. With regard to the electric vehicle charging, I would only say make up to 37 spaces available. Tesla is the industry standard. Tesla decides how many spaces are needed in a community based on the number of cars they have. And those chargers are becoming universal, so my expectation is that they would need more, but we can't tell Tesla how many. And then the other charging standards, they do the same thing. So we'd make those number of spaces available, but we can't necessarily tell Tesla or the other EV chargers, how many to put in. That's up to them. And then I can, number 4 is just not practical as a commitment. So we cannot agree to that. I think we need to make it, we'll have already built our store out and be open for business, so.
Point out that the UDO does require in some situations EV charging stations, irrespective of what Tesla wants to do there. You've seen variances for that were denied for the project on South Walnut. Tesla isn't the only provider of charging stations. We have charging stations, for example, in the city parking garages. The owner of the property can do charging stations. And, again, we didn't make that number up. Part of their argument for why they should get this variance is that they'll put aside space for 37 charging stations, so that's why it's included. And I also want to point out for number 4, whether you leave it in or not, they keep talking about hiring an engineering firm. That's not what we've seen in the past from other uses. So just to be clear, when we asked Starbucks to do a parking study for their, location in Ellettsville, they literally are having a manager go out once an hour and write down how many cars are in the parking lot for a week. That's those are the types of surveys we're seeing. We're not asking you to hire an engineering firm to do a traffic study. That's not what this is. And I'm certain Mr. Grulich was clear about that initially. So I just want to be clear so you all know, we're not asking them to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's literally asking a staff person to poke their head out and count some cars.
Can I speak now?
Conditions, unless there's some other question that we would want petitioners input on at this point. So have you, technically, will you adopt, what do you want to do?
I mean, if 4 is just, Jackie, what you're saying, that's a pretty simple ask. It's not putting any conditions on that. It's just simply saying, if you can demonstrate the continued need for.
So if you want it to be something for this particular site, like Mr. Rooker said, then we'll probably need to have it more fleshed out, indicating if need isn't, if need isn't demonstrated, then what would you want to happen? Otherwise, it's just a point of information for us to say, oh, they did need it, FYI, BZA, or they didn't, then we could take that information to Plan Commission or Council for policy. Right. So Eric's adding now, suggested language, but obviously you'd put whatever we would probably need it to be, yeah.
I do just want to make a statement that this is unusual for us to do this because after we get past the point of the petitioner's final time and it comes to the board, there's typically no other discussion whatsoever because you've made your case. So the president has generously allowed you to provide more information, but that's not part of our rules in order of procedure. So I did want to at least let everyone know that that's unusual for us to do this because we're doing our best in order to try to find an avenue forward for you.
Mr. Rooker, would it be okay to add to number 4, a zoning commitment will be drafted and approved by the board so that we can have more time to flesh out what it would actually be. And then again, as Mr. Throckmorton has pointed out, they don't have to, this is what the board is saying we want to happen in order for this variance to be granted. And then if the petitioners want to agree to it, they can. I just feel like this isn't detailed enough for us to be able to utilize it. Yeah.
I understand. I would not recommend that. And I understand that it's tedious and it's always difficult to draft conditions or findings on the fly. This is not our first time doing that, and it's always a challenge. But I think I would recommend to the board that before the board votes to approve a variance with a particular condition that you have a decent sense about precisely what, in this case, condition 4 is going to mean for the petitioner going forward. So I would recommend at least having, it's fine for a zoning commitment to flesh it out, but you would want to put some details in there regarding what that zoning commitment is to contain in order to guide staff in drafting that zoning commitment. Sorry, Jackie, but I think you
That's
just need to
helpful.
think
Thank you.
about it a little bit.
That would allow me to vote for this, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think number 4 is just an accountability. It's not saying you can't continue to use the spaces and maximize all of them. That's the hope. It's simply stating that if you don't continue to maximize the space, then you're going to remove them. So we're giving you the opportunity to utilize all the spaces per your letter at your various sites. So you're saying this is the use. These spaces are getting maxed out. But prove that, continue to prove that every year, and we're fine.
Monthly average, like an annual monthly average? There's nothing in here indicating, like if 1 month it's 102, we'd make them take out all those spaces. Next month it's, you know what I mean?
Shall be recorded and approved by the board, requiring a parking study be submitted annually for 5 years.
To making it for 3 years instead of 5? Is there a reason for 5?
I cannot give you advice on that, Commissioner Throckmorton.
Okay, I was just curious. Thanks.
I just proposed 5 because it seemed to give certainly an appropriate amount of time for things to ebb and flow. Obviously with businesses, they start off really good, high performance, and then things tend to balance out. The 5 years was simply a suggestion. If you feel like 3 years is adequate, then we can certainly incorporate that language instead.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Mike, so do you think that language is good enough?
Again, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be unhelpful, but
Oh,
I
no,
think
you're
that's up
fine.
to the board to decide, so.
Was it directed to me?
She asked me if I thought that the language was sufficiently definite in number 4.
So the question is, what is the parking study? It's not, the parking study showing average.
It says showing a monthly average need, and any parking spaces over the maximum need shown must be removed.
So a monthly average.
Eric, hold on, I'm going to try to take a different crack at it, just a second.
Perhaps it would be helpful if the board clarified, you do want the board to have the ability or authority to reconsider the number of parking spaces approved in the event that the counts come back below a certain threshold. This is not just for informational purposes. I had heard both discussed, and it wasn't clear what was being proposed for this motion.
I would say yes, because that's to me the middle ground. That's a compromise between what the petitioner is asking for and what the UDO is saying. This is what's guiding how we're trying to do this.
Can I say one thing? We can't spill into the dialysis. It's a non-starter. We can't spill the parking anyway.
It's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Peak seasons, we can't spill in there.
Thank you for your comments, we got it. So, I think that can be handled by signage. They have to have
Right.
committed spaces to the dialysis. So any commitment shall be recorded and approved by the board, requiring a parking study to be submitted annually, showing a monthly average need, and any parking spaces over the maximum need must be removed. So you want one number a month? I think a weekly average.
Okay. Oh, that is so small.
And they're gonna have to keep track.
sorry. Eric, see if this gets at what you're, and the board, obviously, but I want to make sure you're. Okay, a zoning commitment shall be recorded and approved by the board, requiring a parking study to be submitted annually for 5 years. The parking study should show an hourly count for 1 week in each month. Parking spaces over the annual average shall be removed. Parking spaces. After 5 years.
That makes more sense, just to make it 1 week
Yeah.
and to provide that data.
So that would replace number 4, if that is what we were trying to get at with, what, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe if the need is greater and you're spilling into the dialysis center, which we don't want, then you've proved the point of why we gave the variance in the first place. You have more than you need, and it's spilling over. So that's up to you as a group to petition, but to
Assign a particular number of spots.
As a practical matter, if you guys ever, like, as a practical matter, you can't run a business like this. So just, I know I'm not supposed to, but number 4 from when it was 1 line, now 2 paragraphs. The investment is 10 plus.
I might recommend, if the board is going to allow additional comment at the board's discretion, that we do it from the podium so that folks on Zoom and whatnot can hear it as opposed to from the audience. So I'm not trying to be.
It's either, so this is one direction. You might want to, I don't know if you're open to withdrawing.
Sure.
I could put another motion on the table, which would ask for the parking, the usage study, and we continue into the next month, and they demonstrate the need in the manner that we've requested, and we can approve all the parking spaces if it's demonstrated.
over a month's time, like within.
Next hearing.
Okay, next month.
I mean,
But the parking, the business is vacant, so how can they really, they know what's going on?
so they would look at other locations. They would look at 3 similar locations and document it in a way that. I'm sorry, thanks. They would look at 3 other locations, or however many locations that's recommended, and they would do the study, and then we could just approve it based on the demonstrated need. Could we have a comment from the petitioners if that is a more amenable direction? That's the other possible way to go.
So Barry, I'll just say, my intention with this was this would be a parking study unique to this location right here in Bloomington.
Yeah, she's talking about a second option if they choose to
Okay.
continue. You couldn't hear because her mic was off, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. So I was saying that if that motion was withdrawn and we just chose to, if I made a motion to continue the case and asked for the numbers from 3 other locales, the usage study in the manner that we're used to seeing it in order to demonstrate the need, then if the need is demonstrated, we can then grant the variance on that basis. If I asked if somebody from the team wants to respond to that alternate path.
I want to say one thing before you. The Kroger deadline is not arbitrary. We didn't make it up. There's no smoke and mirrors here. It's October 2nd, I believe. Is that right? October 2nd is a drop dead date. They gave us an opportunity. We got a drop dead of October 2nd. So if you'd like to see documentation, Mark can show you. He's one that works it out, okay? So, so we're under time pressure, and if there's too many conditions here, they're out. The other thing, number 7, you work into the number of EV stations. You work your way into it. We can commit to a number of them, but you work into it.
Okay, Mr. Carmen, so I have put a different path forward on the table that I wanted feedback on, and that is to not do this necessarily, but to demonstrate, to demonstrate with data and a usage study the need in 3 other locations similar to this kind of store, and then we would be able to grant perhaps a variance on the number.
Just so you know, October 2nd is our last day.
Okay.
So if it continues to middle of October, November, we're dead.
Okay.
We're just dead. We're trying to do the right thing.
Okay.
And I honor all my commitments. When I build something and do something, we actually have honor. We have a track record of many, many years doing the right thing. And
Mr. Carmen, thank you.
I'll just leave it to John.
Thank you, Mr. Carmen. Did you want to make a comment?
Well, I just wanted to say, just from a timing standpoint, I think someone had mentioned, the timing. The 12 months is unfortunate, right? And you all have your process, and I wholeheartedly respect that. I've been with Academy for about just over 2.5 years. We started market planning in the state of Indiana in May of 2021. And we started discussions with our landlord over 1.5 years ago on this particular site. And so there are a number of moving parts, and Kroger is one of them. And it took us time to work through our internal processes and underwriting, particularly because it's not an ideal size. And particularly because of other things that we evaluate when we look at sites. So when you're going to make a multi-million-dollar investment, it's not like you can snap your fingers and do it, because you've got the moving part of a landlord who has a prime lease with the largest grocery store in the country. It moves at a very slow pace. We're almost a $6.5–7 billion company. Now we're public, so we have different underwriting guidelines. And so you all have your rules, and I 100% respect it. But I did want to just at least let everybody know that we've been looking at this opportunity and been talking to Dave here for well over 1.5 years. It just takes time for these things to actually come to paper. So that's my comment.
Let me follow up. When Mr. Throckmorton asked you earlier about data and tracking things, do you have data from other stores that's more detailed that you could provide in a faster? You would
I would have to look at that, but I think my question would be, what would your time frame be for evaluating? Because I'm going to defer to Dave because I don't have the agreement. If it goes into next month, it puts our schedule at risk and it puts the Kroger deal at risk.
Let me ask a question of our counsel. Mike, given the time that it is right now and the fact that we have 3 other cases tonight on our docket, it's likely that we may have to have another meeting soon in order to handle that. Is it possible to continue a case to that meeting, or do you have to go for the next month?
The board can schedule a special session for consideration of any petition, or just to conduct a board meeting, you can always schedule a special session. Just for clarity, I don't know, you did ask a question. I'm not sure you got a direct answer, President Clapper, but I think the question was, if this petition were continued to the next regular session, which is scheduled for October 19th, 2023, would the petitioner be amenable to that continuance with additional evidence for the board to consider regarding this variance? Right. I think we got an indirect answer, which was no, but I don't know you got a direct answer.
I heard that the deal would not be valid any longer.
In the event that this board would like to or ends up scheduling a special session, it is fine to add this petition to the agenda for such a special session. Typically, or just to give everybody in the audience a sense about that, if the board cannot handle all of its business tonight, there are 3 additional petitions. It does seem likely that that will not happen. The board has to schedule a special session within the next week to consider those remaining petitions that were not considered.
One second before you go, one second. May I ask a question of you? Could you, could we simply add into the language that the material that we're seeking is submitted before October 2nd? And if it's submitted and it's appropriate, then this variance takes effect. In other words, giving them that opportunity to provide it earlier and have it reviewed.
I
No?
heard Mike say before that that's not kosher.
I would advise the board to base its findings on evidence that it's already received, not on evidence it hopes to receive or plans to receive in the future. So,
Okay.
That
That's
would
your
be my
advice. But we could recklessly recklessly ignore that. Okay. We could.
Joe and Tim, I just need to say this. Joe and Tim had it right. You know, planning gets, just one last little comment. Planning gets last word, and they hammer and muck it up and hammer and hammer and hammer. And we need some help. We got a vacant building.
Mr. Carmen, we understand the situation respectfully. I'm sorry. Please.
So what I'll do, this is my motion, and if October 2nd is the drop dead date, that falls under number 3, which is that the strict application results of practical difficulties. I'm going to stand by that, and I'll strike all the conditions and stand by making a motion to approve the variance. That's the simplest, that to me, because again, this is, the more complicated this gets, I understand what we're trying to propose, but number 3 stating that the strict application, which this is, results in practical difficulties. The most practical difficulty here is the October 2nd drop dead date. And if that goes away and the whole thing could go, that's too big of an opportunity missed. And I think they've presented enough to pass it. So I will go back to my original motion with no conditions.
Point of order, sorry, I'm talking too much tonight, but I think that motion is currently on the table and has been seconded.
I don't have also an issue if you wanted to add any of those recommendations that are not issues. I don't have a problem, amending your motion to accept those findings from the petitioner, but also there are some pieces in there that the petitioner has said that they would be willing to do, and why not add that to it just so you have it?
That's fine. I mean, I'm amenable to that if we can get to an agreement with the petitioner on what conditions are going to be, where can we meet in the middle on some of these?
And what I heard was that everything except item number 4 was on the table. So, I mean, you could make that motion if you wanted. I'm just adding that. You could do it if you wanted, but there's no compelling reason you need to.
Would you like to ask the petitioner if you want to know if they're amenable to everything other than 4?
Right. Yes.
Okay, could one representative please?
Would the petitioner be amenable to all conditions striking number 4?
If they could step to the podium, please?
Please approach the podium. We can't hear on Zoom or cats.
And one person. Just please answer the question.
We need it passed just like we've got it. We'll honor our commitments. I'll personally see to that there's some charging stations, sidewalks. We need to get rid of the Kroger thing. We just got to do the right thing. Tim's on the right track. Joe, and I think you are, we're all on the right track. We're wanting to take something terrible and make something nice, and we don't have time. And
are you amenable to these conditions? Because that is what, to any of them.
He can say the ones.
Okay. What we'd like to make a condition on is unequivocal dedication of the ride-sharing spaces, however it's programmed, either by us or by the city or a third party.
Okay, so 8 you are amenable to.
Okay. 37 parking spaces at least made available. It you can't snap your fingers and make charging stations happen. I understand that it's not just Tesla, but it's not something that private individuals can just make happen. But we will make them available, and generally, electric vehicle charging companies, whether it's Tesla or somebody else, love free spaces.
Okay, so up to 37, if the language changes to up to 37.
And those are the commitments that we'd like to make.
And
Everything else, I think, can be discussed, but for example, landscaping every 10 spaces, I can't do site planning in my head, so I don't know what that looks like, but we can talk about that. But those two are what we're looking
Okay,
at.
so we can amend 7 and 8. Right. What if we kept number 1, strike everything else, and then keep 7 and 8 as amended?
Okay, 1 is fine.
One.
You please,
7, we'll work our way into it. We'll start up with,
If we say up to,
what does that mean, up to?
you're making up to 37 spaces available for electric vehicle charging station, not just to Tesla.
We'll make at least 37 available. It could be more.
I don't know about, see, this is not working. I'm sorry, we're gonna have to continue this to our next meeting, which will most
Can I
likely be
state-
next week.
May I
Okay?
state clearly what we'll agree to?
Pardon me?
May I state clearly what we'll agree to? We'll agree to number 1. We'll agree to number 7, as described, and we'll agree to the ride share.
I just don't like the way this is going. I think that we need to think about this, and so my recommendation to the board is that that you withdraw your motion, and then we give this some more thought, and we bring this back. I will be happy to come back next week for even a special hearing to hear this case again, to reopen this case. But I feel like we need to think about this a little bit more. I don't like this horse trading kind of attitude.
Yeah, so there's a motion, Mike can correct, Mr. Brooker, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a motion and a second on the floor, so we can vote for it, and if it doesn't pass, then we can take another motion.
alternatively, as President Clapper has suggested, Commissioner Ballard, you would have the option of withdrawing your motion. Of course, that's entirely up to you.
Yeah.
I'd rather not. I'd rather amend it to 1, 7, and 8
Okay.
included
Okay.
and put it on the table.
So the motion has been amended. It would need a new second.
My understanding was you had a different language for 7, though. Is that the language? Or was it up to 37 spaces to be made available?
That's the language.
The language is there?
Yes.
Okay. A minimum of 37, okay. Okay, so.
I'm so sorry, so
we
did
already-
anyone second that amended motion?
Do we have a second?
What is the motion?
Okay, so the motion is adopt the petitioner's findings and approve B 2723 with the following conditions: number 1, 7, and 8 only.
So you are requiring there to be 37 EV charging stations.
Yes, made available, and minimum 26 rideshare.
Okay, that's the motion. Okay, so.
I'm so sorry, do we have a
I
second?
need a second.
Yeah.
I need a second. Last chance for a second. Pardon me? Are you going to second?
I just need more time.
Okay, so the motion does not get a second. I will put a motion.
I'm so sorry, but is the original motion without the amendment still on the table? Thank you.
So that motion is off the table, and that motion that Commissioner Ballard just made failed for lack of a second.
Thank you.
Okay, so then I will make a motion to continue V-27-23 to our next meeting.
I might recommend that the board, I know that it's only 7:55, but if the board is going to continue a public hearing to another session, that you might want to identify when that special session is at this time.
Okay, to a special session, can we please look at our calendars?
Yep.
So I would propose, oh, hang on. God, I forget. Next Tuesday or next Wednesday?
I agree with that.
Mhm.
Do next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay, I'm sorry, next Tuesday or Thursday?
Oh,
I can't do
do
Wednesday.
Thursday.
You can't do Thursday. You can do Tuesday. Can you do Tuesday?
26th?
The 26th.
Yes, I can.
Okay, okay. So to a meeting next Tuesday, the 26th, can I say at 5, can we have it at 5:30?
I believe so. We will not be in Chambers.
Yeah.
We would be in McCloskey.
Can you get, yeah.
We'll be in McCloskey?
Is McCloskey
Okay.
available?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that's part of the motion, is that we'll move this to continuance to next Tuesday's meeting at 5:30, September the 26th. Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. Any discussion? Any
Is
more
the
discussion?
petitioner agreeable to this? I mean, there's no point to meet if, yes?
I would assume so. This is,
Yeah, multiple people said yes.
Okay.
okay.
Ready?
So, can we have a vote, please?
5:30.
5:30. 5:30. 5:30. 5, yeah, well, you can join late. You can join late.
Yep.
Okay, vote, please, roll call, please.
Clapper,
Yes.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Ballard,
Yes.
Burrell. Oh, I'm sorry, Farrell.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Okay, we are on to, does anybody need a break? We're going to take 5 minutes. Okay, so we are reconvening, and our fourth member, had to leave by 8 o'clock. So Joe is not going to be with us. The board is, so at this point, we have 3 other petitions on the schedule, and your cases can be heard by us, but there will only be 3 people. And that means that you would need all 3 votes in order to get a positive recommendation. If you get 2 or 1, then it fails. We are going to be meeting next Tuesday, so we are happy to continue the case to next Tuesday. That is your option. Are you able to stay to hear all 3 cases if they are open to that?
I would think I could stay till probably about 10.
To 10, okay. So, and are you able to stay to hear all 3 cases? Okay, so I'm willing to stay, and we have somebody who's willing to stay. Nikki's able to stay until 10, so we can see where we are at about 9:30 or about 9 o'clock, see how we're doing on time. But it is up to, so the next case would be V-28-23, Hoosier Commons LLC. It is up to you if you want to be heard this evening.
We have a Hoosier Commons, we'd like to come back and
Okay,
to the special
sure.
session.
No problem. So do we have to continue it? Yes. Okay,
Vote to continue it.
till Tuesday. We would do that till Tuesday.
Correct. So I would recommend somebody make a motion to that effect and
Okay.
go from there.
So I move a continuance on case V-28-23, Hoosier Commons LLC, to next Tuesday. Second, vote please.
Okay. Ballard,
Yes.
Farrell,
Yes.
Clapper? Yes, thank you. Okay, the case is continued. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
and just
Sorry
for-
for the inconvenience.
Just for clarity, that's continued till next Tuesday at 5:30 PM in the McCloskey Conference Room, which was just next door.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next case is V-30-23 Scott Andrews. Do you want to be heard this evening? Okay, so we will move forward with a staff report for that case. Who is that? That is Eric, once again. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a request for Scott Andrews for a property that they own, or he owns at 122 East Miller Drive. So the petitioner is here tonight to request a variance from maximum parking standards to allow for 31 parking spaces for a fitness center, small use in the mixed use medium scale. So as I mentioned, this property is zoned mixed use medium scale and has been developed with a office building that was a former home to a fitness center. So it's a somewhat industrial building. It did contain a fitness center, Iron Pit Gym. Again, that use was removed and the building sat empty for several years. And the petitioner has a new use moving in there that is the same use category, but is a somewhat different type of use. So the uses going in there is for Elite Fitness, and they are a training facility. So they operate by classes with certain staff members. People sign up for these classes. So specifically, this is for a cheerleading training center. So the property has been developed with one building, surface parking lot just to the side of it. So we did approve a staff level minor site plan approval that showed all of the parking spaces being removed to the maximum that were allowed. And the petitioner since that time has realized that, the amount of spaces that were shown and approved, the 23 spaces that were shown, is not going to meet their need. And they had been working towards coming up with a definitive parking study, similar to what staff has encouraged folks in similar situation to prepare, which is a study of their existing location, counting the number of cars, giving us detailed information about staff, students, and enrollment. So they are coming forward tonight to request this variance to add for additional parking spaces to allow for 33 parking spaces. So as I mentioned, this is the site plan that was submitted and approved with their staff level minor site plan approval. This showed the site coming into complete compliance. There were new islands installed interior to the site. Some parking spaces were removed to meet that 23 maximum. Parking spaces were removed along the front to meet the parking setback. There is a sidewalk connection between the building and the street. And so the petitioners have proposed and brought forward a new site plan showing the number of the 31 parking spaces that they are requesting. Again, there will still be an island installed so that we did not have more than 10 parking spaces within the site without an island. The parking setback is still being met. The minimum landscape area is still being met. So no variances are being requested or needed from that aspect. So they are simply requesting to allow the 31 parking spaces. So in your packet and on the screen, I've just included a snippet of one of those particular days, but in your packet, you have a full study showing a full week of activities, outlining the number of athletes and the number of staff, as well as the number of parking spaces used at their existing location on the west side of town. So each of these instances, looking at the number of staff and the number of students on site, going through each of the month, you consistently see a number of parking spaces used that is above the 23 that is allowed by code. So this space this property is certainly unique in that there is not on-street parking. There is not immediately adjacent publicly accessible parking spaces. The property to the west is an apartment complex. And the property to the east is an office owned by IU Health, not under control by the petitioner or owned by them. So there is not an opportunity for any kind of shared parking or on-street spaces. The number that they are requesting, this 31, still is, somewhat below what their average need is based on that week. But it is a balance of meeting the UDO requirements for the limited compliance standards and also allowing to get closer to what their actual need is. So we do find that this does meet the criteria that are in the staff's report. And I am happy to answer any questions. We are recommending that the board adopt our proposed findings and approve this variance with the one condition that is listed in staff's report. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Eric. Petitioner, could you please step to the podium and state your name?
Hi, good evening. Scott Andrews.
Mr. Andrews, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have up to 20 minutes to state your case.
Thank you. And thank you for staying. Appreciate that. So, slide 2. So, I've owned this property for a little over 30 years. This used to be Indiana Gymnastics and then the Iron Pit, if you remember. And obviously, it's not a very nice looking property, rather an eyesore. And then when I asked the Iron Pit to move out, it was right before COVID. And, the building sat empty for 3 years, but I did have it in an LOI with GoPuff on 2 occasions, actually, right? And so, yes, it did sit empty for longer than a year. However, the tenant that's moving in is the exact same type of business that has been in there and that I had when it was Indiana Gymnastics. Can you go to the next slide? So when I decided to renovate the building to make it more attractive to people, I hired a landscape designer from Spring Point to put in all the landscaping and to put in a wall, a 75-foot wall by 15 feet. And so when the lease was signed on February 12th of this year, my tenant expected to be in by October. And I don't know what took so long, because when I renovated the exterior of the building, the permit was approved in 2 weeks. The interior permit with the parking lot has taken 10 weeks or more. And so I expected to present here in July, and then it got pushed to August, and for some reason, we missed that deadline. And at that point, I was hoping to ask for a variance that I didn't have to do anything, right? But this is the first proposal where I was asked to install 5 islands, and it would remove 18 parking spots. So there were a total of 41 parking spots. I had been asked to remove 18 because only 3 parking spots are allowed per 1,000 square feet. It's a 7,000 square foot building, so 23 parking spots, which immediately I knew wasn't going to work for the new tenant. And the reason why she selected my building is because of the parking and why she's moving out of her current situation. So anyway, here we have 5 islands removing 18 parking spots. Can you go to the next slide? And also there's a dumpster that was in an easement in Black Lumber, the very back of Black Lumber. So I had to move that as well, and that's taking up 2 spots as well. So I guess this is probably difficult. Can you zoom in on, and slide it down? Thank you. So what we proposed, so let me go back. Again, I didn't want to put in any islands. I didn't want to do a single thing because I know that her parking needs are the 41 that are currently there. But because she needs to get in by October, I'm like, okay, I'll spend more money and let's start to put the islands in, right? And just get approval. So we came up with the plan. My engineering team that I hired came up with the plan to do 4 islands. The difference is in the south east corner right here would be 3 parking spots. The 2 in the middle would be 1 parking spot each as opposed to 2 parking spots before. And then in the previous slide, there was a island slated to be on the on the north west side, but that one's been removed. And so now the one on the northeast side would only be 2 parking spots taken away as well. And next slide, please. Yeah. That's all right. So again, what we're asking for is that we would remove 10 parking spots. We would have the 4 islands with landscaping in it. I've already moved the dumpster. And of course, we would have the 2 handicap parking spots. Next slide. And going over what I already said, well, okay. So I'm a huge proponent of beautification, of doing what's right, making Bloomington more attractive to everyone. I want my tenant to be proud of the building and to succeed. So I'm more than willing to do what it takes and what the city wants me to do. I just want there to be some sort of understanding, common sense, and that every once in a while there is a reason to allow people to do something different, even though it's the law. So anyway, I feel as if this, if you move out, if you don't have a tenant for a year, then it all of a sudden triggers an ordinance that is really for the Sam Clubs of the world and the big grocery stores. It shouldn't necessarily apply to people that have under 100 parking spots or 50. I don't know what the magic number is, but for me to have to install as a small business owner all these islands is just incredibly expensive, especially after I've been there for so many years and I'm already renovating, making the building and the community better. And the negative impact of losing the parking when you only have 40 going down to 23, but even the 31 is extremely impactful and hurtful. It's just so much greater than the grocery stores that we're dealing with. And next slide. So again, going away today, if you're like, what I would really want, what's it called? I would really love a condition where you override the islands and you say, okay, you don't have to have any islands. Because, again, it's basically the same business that I had when I opened it up 30 years ago, and then the Iron Pit was also a gym. I know for a fact that when I had the gymnastics school, I taught cheerleading as well. Cheerleading was the moneymaker for me. So even though the name of the business was Indiana Gymnastics, I made my money through those classes. So I had gymnasts that would, or cheerleaders that would drive from Bedford, Paoli. I even had people come from Vincennes. And because of that they would come so far and drive 2 hours one way to me, they sit in the parking lot, right? And you will have 6 classes of 10 people generally, or what have you. And so, you know, and then you have overlapping classes, right? One's ending and they're coming early. The parking lot is just jam-packed. So even though I had 41 parking spots that were striped, people would park behind my building as well. And I know that that's what's going to happen with the new tenant, even though it's now grass. Can you go to the next one? So this is just an example of what I've done. I've installed 22 brand new trees, plus there were 6 already on the property, so I have a total of 28 total trees. I installed 67 shrubs, 157 grasses, ferns, perennials, 46 bulbs, for a total of 292 total plantings, and it cost me $107,000, basically, over and above the $840,000 that I've put in renovating the building. And because it's the 1 year was triggered, which I understand it's the law, right? But you have to be able to see, okay, this is the exact same type of business that's been in it for 30 years. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, wait, I'm so sorry. I don't know where I was going with that. So, I'm sorry, give me a minute.
Business that you've been there for 30 years, and that you're, after the 12 months, you were having to make this significant investment.
Right, I know that it triggers that, but even though it's over a year, you have to make some grace periods for you know, and just to require a small businessman or woman to invest this much money, it is just kind of really difficult for me. And you can see how dense the landscaping is. Can you go to the next photo? So because I care about my tenant and I care about the property, I've already spent the money to install the very first island so that it's 20 foot off the front of the building. But I took this picture for you to see kind of how egregious it is, because you see that it butts up already to a planting site, right? The very front of my building. And so if I wanted to do it right, I have to spend money again to saw out that back that back curb area so that it all becomes one. Do you see that? Do you understand what I'm saying?
It's like north, south, east, west.
Can you, yeah, that right there, yes. So I'm having to pay to have that sawed out, right? So that everything is just one, right? And looks nice, right? That's just an increased cost that I have. And you see on the far left of that, there's a drainage there that I paid to have installed, right? Because when I repave the parking lot, all the water will drain to that drain. But I was made to create another drain or cut in the curb in that planting area there. Do you see that? Where it goes into the island? Yeah, that, Right. So it's all these little things that keep adding up that are just crazy when I know that my tenant needs the parking. Oh, and also that each island requires a canopy tree, right? Right next to that island, I know it's probably difficult for you to see, is a Japanese maple tree, right? And it's just one thing after another that it's like, how much can I do? Can you go to the next slide? So the picture on the left is as you enter the parking lot, which the entry is shared with IU Health. As a good neighbor, and because I care about how my property looks, whether IU Health does or not, and they do, but whether they do or not, I took the initiative, and all this was before anything was triggered. All the landscaping, everything took place during COVID. But I've paid to have that bark laid, and there are annuals and perennials that, are planted in there just to make our property look nice, right? I've taken on that cost. And if you can see, I planted 8 yellowwood trees there, and none of them count towards the city points, however you add that up. Because yellowwoods, the average height is, I think, max of 25 feet, but the city requires something like a max of 35 feet. So all that money, all those trees that I put in because I care and I'm a good neighbor and I'm a good citizen of Bloomington is for naught. And along that island, I've installed 58 bushes along the median, right? So you're asking me to take away parking spots to butt up to that island or to that median. 2 of them would butt up to that. I mean, doesn't that just seem illogical? And how much more can you ask this guy to do? Okay, next slide. So this is the back of my building that butts up to black lumber. As you can see in the picture on the right, I installed 13 trees along there, and I put in river rock to go all the way across and planted 30 additional bushes there just because I care. No one asked me to do it, right? And so I would hope that you would take that into account when you're considering landscaping and the islands. I understand, I don't want big parking lots, but my tenant needs it, and she'll show you her parking study and she can speak to it. But when I've put in this much landscaping, and you obviously can tell that I care about my property and that I'm in agreement with the overall picture that Eric and that the city has, but I mean, this is bankrupting me. I just don't know what else to do. Can you go to the next slide? And so again, I don't know if you can see it or if she needs to zoom in. My dumpster used to be located where the 9 bark are on the right. Yep. So it was located in between that, and it was in the easement for 30 years, right? Black Lumber didn't care, what have you. But the 1 year triggered that I have to move it, and I had to make it much bigger. And they required that I lay all this concrete. I don't know if you know how much concrete costs, but it's outrageously expensive right now. So, and this was just poured today. And what else? And again, that also takes away 2 more parking spots, right? So I'm really down to 29, not 31. Can you go to the next slide? And prior to the 1 year kicking in, I had already laid concrete for a bike rack, the one on the right, the darker one, right? But there's a new ordinance, I guess, that says that concrete pad, which was within the standards, isn't large enough. So I had to lay another pad, and which ruined some of the landscaping as well. And so for that reason, I'm hoping that you have some kind of understanding that, and this island that I've already put in, that I have formed, if you're, kind enough and considerate enough to not allow me to have to put in islands because you believe she does need all 41 parking spots, or actually 39 now, I would just repave that. I'd take that on because I know how important the parking is for her business's success. Next slide. Oh, so this is basically what I just said. The number one thing to consider is her needs, not the amount of money that I have already spent in landscaping, but she absolutely needs it for her business. Two, the hardship that it is on me to not only has this extended the amount of time that it's taken and pushed it to the very last second, where construction will be finalized in the next week, I hope, or 2 weeks. But I lost my train of thought again. Oh, I'm out of time. Okay, so thank you for listening. I'm sorry that I wasn't more eloquent, but thank you for listening.
Okay, so we are back to we're to the board for questions. And it sounds like there's a difference, a slightly different request coming forward. If I understood Mr. Andrews correctly, he would like consideration for having 33 parking spaces in lieu of the 31.
You can consider the variance that was noticed to the public. So the variance that's in the packet is the only one you can consider. So for example, if he doesn't want islands, that's a variance request. It's a requirement of code. I believe Mr. Grulich talked about that, at least with the representative, and they decided to file for the number. So Mr. Grulich can correct me if I'm wrong.
So that can't be amended at this
I don't
point?
believe so,
It would be a
yes.
different request?
Correct.
Okay.
Because of the notice that goes to the neighbors and to the
Okay,
paper
thank you
describing the
for
request.
clarifying that. Okay, so we are not able to consider that a change in the number of parking spaces that are being requested?
You can, I'm sorry, I want to clarify for Jackie.
Okay.
You can consider what number of, any variance from the parking space maximums you can consider, because that's been noticed, that's been delivered, that's been published. So we've complied with all the legal requirements
Okay.
to let everybody know that this site might not be compliant with those standards. However, I think what we heard in the oral presentation a moment ago was a request for relief from some of the landscaping requirements. That was not requested when we put the notice in the newspaper and sent it to everybody. We didn't tell anybody
That's a
that
separate
was.
variance.
So that would require a separate submission on that subject matter. Is that what you were trying to say, Jackie?
Notice that went to the paper says to allow a maximum of 31 parking spaces. So I was saying that is the variance request in this particular case.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I guess at this time, it sounds like there's a time issue also. So it does not sound like you want to refile anything, you don't have that ability. I see people shaking their head now. Okay, so then we are going to be considering what was submitted. Okay, any other questions? No. Questions? Nope. We are to the public for comment. Is there anybody here who'd like to make a comment on this petition? If so, please step to the lectern. And if you could sign in, please. Thank you. And if you could state your name.
Good evening. My name is Angie Collins.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay, of up to 5 minutes.
So thank you for hearing me, especially after kind of a contentious last petition, but I'm hoping this one will go much more smooth. My name is Angie Collins again, and I actually own Royalty Elite, which is the tenant that will be going into 122 East Miller Drive. We opened in 2018 on the west side of town. We are a competitive cheerleading facility. We are the only facility of its kind in about a 60-mile radius that offers the scope and depth of services, classes, teams. Right now, I currently have 15 different teams that we have formed. Many of them travel not only here like locally, but we travel nationally. We go to Florida every year. We're very competitive, we're very talented, and we are growing. We opened in 2018 with 55 total athletes in our gym and about 4 teams. And now here, 6 seasons later, we are in season 6. We have 150 athletes on teams, and then we have another probably 65 to 70 athletes that come to us for either a cheer abilities class or tumbling classes, private lessons, stunt lessons. IU Cheer also comes to our facility from time to time. We do actually have agreements when we move into our new facility with the high schools, specifically with South, to come and rent our facility because the space is so desirable. There's nothing else like this in our community. My current clientele travels from up to probably an hour away. We have kids on teams that travel from Mitchell and Paoli. We have a Bedford contingent. We have a Nashville, Columbus carpool group that goes. So those people that come from far away do already carpool. And even with those individuals that do that, these are all kids from 3 to 18 years old that come to our facility. So we have 2 senior teams, which are our high school age teams now. Those are the only groups of kids that do actually drive themselves to the facility. Everyone else is, of course, reliant on a parent to bring them there. So one of the reasons that getting this parking variance, the maximum parking spaces that we can get, is to support that clientele and the types of clients that I deliver services to. We have kids that come routinely for 2.5-hour practices, and they do that 2 times a week. They come 2 other times a week for jumps classes, flexibility classes, tumbling classes. If you go to our existing facility on the west side of Bloomington, it's embarrassing, the traffic problem. I hate that I'm not a good neighbor to my neighbors over there because of the traffic issue. And the most compelling reason for choosing this specific location was seeing that there was about 40 plus parking spaces. So I was ignorant of kind of the process, as you can imagine, and only learned probably within the last 2 months that there was additional standards and compliance issues that had to be met. And that was after I had inked the deal to spend the next 7 years at this location. So anything more than the maximum is absolutely needed. I went out and personally did a parking study. I actually did one in March when we thought we were going to be able to come in the summer for this type of a hearing. And then I redid it in June. In our world, June resets our season. So in May, we have tryouts. We place our teams. In June, everything starts. And so I went out in June and spent time looking at both my classes, my enrollment data, and took pictures in the parking lot to see how many kids, parents, coaches were in the facility at a given time. It is more than the parking that's even there. So I'm gonna have to already deal with what do I do now? Where can I encourage people to utilize other avenues of parking? Can I encourage my coaches to park someplace else so that I can free up those 8-9 spots for individuals? So I will just say I clearly am in favor of this variance because I am the tenant. I am going to be continuing to grow in this community. It's a wonderful sport. I mean, you guys probably know families and children that go to my gym. We love our kids, we love our community, and we intend to be here for a long time. And part of that is making sure that we have the required resources, such as parking. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who would like to speak to this petition? Is there anybody? Oh. Are you moving up to the podium? Okay. If you could just state your name again, you've already been sworn in this evening.
Thank you. My name is Dave Harstead. I have a PowerPoint. Would you please pull that up? Yeah, so while that's being done, this lease was signed a long time ago, and we've been waiting a very long time. And unfortunately, this is just an example of how we shouldn't do business in this city. It's just been a bad experience. I hope I'm not speaking out of line, Scott, but it's taken way too long. The requirements have been unreasonable, and I wanted to show you this slide to just kind of orient you. I don't know where your screen is and what you can see, but the site is on the north side of Miller Drive. This shows Miller Drive. And so directly across the street, what we are screening for, what $50,000, $60,000 of additional landscaping that goes in because of this requirement is going to screen a bus parking lot, which is owned by a municipal corporation, our school corporation. It has no landscape islands in it. It has no impervious or pervious pavers in it. It has no trees. It has no trees in the tree plot. Just down the street to the right, the big massive building that you see is our stormwater utility. These are the folks who are making these arguments that Mr. Grulich made earlier about heat islands and all these important policy objectives. And the overwhelming thing that we see is impervious pavement, no trees, no islands, no trees screening the actual neighbors across the street, et cetera. So very difficult to swallow this requirement. I gave Scott bad advice when we first had this building come up for the market. It was basically an industrial building, and there's a shortage of small 7,000 square foot buildings. The time there was a PUD in place, we talked to staff because the new ordinance, the new UEDO was coming online. What we should have done is simply put a supply company in there. And it would have been legal at the time. It wouldn't have cost Scott much money at all. We wouldn't have had landscaping compliance. The building wants to be either an industrial building, an office building, or fitness. And because of that, because of COVID, office and fitness was literally just completely wiped off the map, right? There was no fitness deals happening, no office deals happening during COVID. We didn't know it was coming, obviously, but very difficult situation. The use that we have here requires parking in a big way. And so I get that there's an activist community out there that believes that we don't need parking, and they're wrong, right? We need parking in this city. And we need balance. I'm a huge proponent of high quality aesthetics. Clearly, Scott is even a greater proponent of high quality aesthetics. And so he is the ultimate good neighbor on this street. And so it would be great if we had some other good neighbors on the street, including our stormwater utility, et cetera, and other municipal organizations that aren't doing anything even close to what Scott is doing. So sorry to be sort of a jerk about this, but I can't hold back. It's just, this is a rough one. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this petition? Is there anybody online?
If you'd like to speak on Zoom, you can raise your virtual hand or send a message to the host. I don't see anybody.
Okay. Okay.
You did not have any time left, no.
Couple of minutes if you want to say something more.
The only thing I want to say is this process has taken a ridiculously long time period. I never would have ever, and Eric knows this, I stressed it and stressed it and stressed it, that I didn't want any islands, that I shouldn't have to be required to it. The only reason why I'm being put in this position to spend $60,000 additional for these islands and to remove parking that was going to hurt her business is because this took so long, and that, she has to be in by October. She's tried to extend her lease for another month so that I could come back and so that I could go for the variance. But I couldn't come for the variance and say, I don't want any parking islands, because if you turn me down for no parking islands, she couldn't have moved in. And so I've been delayed 3 months. I know for a fact that my contractor submitted something and it sat in an employee's basket for 3 weeks. I know it for a fact. She has admitted it, right? And so I'm in this position to spend so much money, and I'm just, I've heard nothing about how difficult Bloomington is to do business in. I've never experienced it, but this is just, my husband just is like, we've got to sell the building, get out of it. But I'm putting in $1 million into a building that's only worth $1.3 million. You're right, and yet I have to add parking islands when I'm just a small-time business guy, right? And she needs it, and I know she needs it because we did the exact same business. And I can't say, okay, approve or cancel this this amendment that I'm asking to do, and I'll come back next month and ask for 0, because she has to be in my building, and I can't get a temporary permit to allow her to move into the building for the next month, so that I can come back and fly from California for another thing. It's just, I don't know. It's just been a terrible, terrible experience.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your comments, and we are back to the board for action.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So what's allowed now is 23, and the written request is for 31?
And that's how it was advertised.
Yes, that is correct. That is the variance that is being requested, is to allow for 31 parking spaces.
Okay. But the petitioner, just to clarify again, is asking for...
He would love to, he's asking for 31. He would like to not build these, but is there no other place on the site for additional parking? I guess is the only question. Eric, at the end of the site where the trash is, can that not be 2 parking spaces in front of that?
I would imagine that there is possibilities on the site for other parking. To me, islands and landscaping, I don't immediately know that. That would be up for them to kind of design and then come forward. We're processing for the number that they came forward and applied for. They chose to come forward with just a variance from the maximum number of spaces to allow the 31 based on what their engineer came up with. If they would have came forward with a different number, then that's what would be heard tonight. So we're just kind of processing what, they filed for.
Oh, excuse me. So I want to ask a question of the petitioner or from Eric. I just don't understand exactly the site plan. It looks like you come in and then do you go out through the neighboring property? Is there a second exit out the back, or does it, is it
Yes,
dead
so
end?
I believe that they have an easement through the property to the east.
Okay. So is that easement, is that required? Do you need to go out the back?
Oh, no, almost nobody goes out that back. 30 years ago, well, I was the very first building on that block, right, from going north, before IU Health. IU Health moved in, and one day they walked across the median, And they said, hey, would you mind if we connected parking lots? I said, sure.
Okay,
There's no
okay.
written agreement, no nothing.
Okay.
Right? But you're going to have me add these islands attached to the median that already has 8
Okay.
trees and 56.
Okay. Yes, I'm wondering.
Yes. The request and notice were for 31 parking spaces.
So I guess I'm just wondering if we were to, it looks like with the configuration, and I don't know about your, the in and out there at the end, and if that has to be maintained. I don't know if that's an actual easement, but it looks like there could be some additional parking spaces that could fit back there if you close that off. I mean, you don't need to comment on it right now because we can't do anything more than what you have petitioned for this evening, but that might be worth some consideration in the future, is all I'm saying.
I understand. Yeah, if you remember in the PowerPoint, that's where the concrete pad was for the dumpster truck to back up into.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
Just very quickly, I noticed my clock says 8:56. So if the discussion is going to continue for more than 3 more minutes, you are going to have to suspend your rules to allow the board to
Thank
continue
you.
proceeding
Okay.
after 9 p.m.
Okay, so
Whether or not you're hearing the fourth petition?
we have
So-
decided that we'll go until 10 o'clock.
So you'll include that?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
So we are suspending our rules and we're continuing.
We'll need I'm sorry.
We need a motion.
A motion
I
and a
need
unanimous vote, so.
Okay.
I make a motion that we suspend our rules and continue until 10 o'clock.
I second that.
And
And-
hear the fourth petition.
And yes, and
hear
both
the-
to continue until 10 p.m. and to hear the fourth petition that
Yes.
it remains on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Farrell?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Ballard?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, and there were no condition of approval. There are no further conditions, correct? I'm
Just checking.
I think there was one for 38
Page 38.
there.
Oh, yes. And that with the one condition of approval as stated by the, by staff. Okay. And I want to just thank Mr. Andrews for his testimony here. I want to thank Mr. Andrews for his testimony here this evening. And I think it's important to understand what citizens go through in wrestling with our current set of regulations. And I think in the future that there is going to be some reconsideration, perhaps of certain aspects of this. And I will definitely point to your testimony as something that should be heard. So I just want to let you know that. And if anybody has any further comments.
Yeah, I would just say, our hands are very much tied here. Like, it's not within our purview to make an amendment about the islands or anything. We can completely understand where you're coming from. As a small business owner, being able to support small business is paramount to me, to our group, really. And I believe staff as well. But this is just it's a very narrow purview. When people come in, sometimes I don't think they fully understand what we're allowed to do and able to do. It's a very narrow thing we can do. So I want to support this particular one on the table and wish you the best all around.
Yeah, and just encourage you to look at the site plan and see if there are other alternatives. I think your parking studies could provide further evidence. Anything else you want to say?
You need a second?
Yes.
A second.
Thank you.
The motion.
Oh, we didn't have a second? I'm sorry. I'm getting
No,
tired. Okay,
Yes.
okay, okay. So
You
I
have a
think we're
motion
ready
and
to
a second
vote.
for approval with the one condition in the staff report?
Yep.
Thank you. Ballard?
Yes.
Farrell?
Yes.
Clapper. Yes.
Thank you.
The variance is approved. Good luck. Wish you best of luck there.
They're on Zoom. Yeah, it's Angela. Are we? Okay, Mr. Grulick, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear anybody. I didn't hear Barry. I think your mic was
We
off.
haven't queued you up yet, sorry. Okay,
Oh,
so our next and final petition, is there a petitioner here? Petitioner's representative is here.
What?
Who's the petitioners? They're online?
Angela Parker is the petitioner's representative.
She's online, correct,
And she's
Eric?
online, okay.
Yes, she's online.
Okay, fabulous, okay. So we are ready to hear V-31-23.
Thank you. So this is a request from Red Truck Bloomington for a property at 116 North Grant Street. The petitioners are here tonight to request a variance from the minimum primary structure standards to allow one-story addition to a building in the mixed-use downtown in the University Village Overlay District. So this property is at the southeast corner of 6th and Grant. It is within the mixed-use downtown district and within the University Village Overlay, as I mentioned. It has been developed with 3 buildings. There are 2 buildings along 6th Street that are used as residences. And then this also contains the Big Woods Brewing Company restaurant location. So the petitioners are here tonight to request this variance now in order to allow for an addition to an existing building on the site that has kind of served a variety of roles over the years. So it is the building in the center of the site here. It was previously just a garage that was associated with the adjacent residence to the north. It was refinished some time ago to allow it to be used as a restroom and serving area within the site. And so the petitioners would like to do an expansion to that to allow for some additional seating on the site. So within the University Village Overlay, there is a minimum primary structure height of 25 feet. The building currently and the addition is proposed to only be 11 feet 9 inches and therefore does not meet the minimum primary structure height standard. And so they are requesting the variance to allow for the addition. So this elevation here shows the existing building. The addition would happen on the east side of the building. And as I mentioned, contain a new seating area, and it would be a one-story design to match the existing building. So again, you know, as we've discussed with many different projects, you know, there is a standard within the zoning code for minimum primary structures within the downtown. You know, we can certainly go into the reasoning behind that, which is, you know, within our downtown, we want a compact urban form. We want taller buildings. One-story buildings within the downtown are inappropriate in scale in regards to massing and size for adjacent buildings. So that's why there's a minimum. You know, the downtown is the only zoning district where there is a minimum primary structure height. And that is there for a very specific reason. So as we go through our variance findings, you know, we certainly don't find that there are any, that the granting of the variance would be injurious to the public health or safety. You know, the proposed addition would meet all building or fire codes. So there's no negative finding there. However, as we go through here, you know, into the findings for the use and value adjacent to the area, you know, in this, we do find that there is a negative impact. You know, the granting of the variance to allow a one-story addition to a one-story building does not promote the general design and development guidelines that were envisioned for the downtown. We have numerous documents, the comprehensive plan, the downtown vision and infill strategy plan, were all documents that looked at how we want our downtown to develop. And then the guidelines and the rules within the Unified Development Ordinance were written to accomplish that. The perpetuation of one-story buildings does not promote the design and the guidelines that were envisioned and were written into code within our downtown. The second finding here, or the third finding here, the aspect that what is unique about this property that does not allow them to meet code? What is the practical difficulty in the use of the property that would be relieved by the granting of the variance? You can't make that argument. The property has a use now. It has seating. It has many uses that are happening within there. Not allowing this addition would not deprive them the reasonable use of the property. They could certainly construct a two-story addition if they wanted to. There is nothing about the property that prevents them from constructing a two-story addition and meeting the code. Without being able to make any findings in that regard, we are not able to find that the application of the terms of the UDO result in practical difficulties in the use of the property, and therefore we cannot recommend approval of this. And we recommend that the board adopt the findings that I outlined and are written in staff's report and deny this variance request.
Thank you, Eric. Petitioner?
Okay, I think I'm on.
Okay. Could you please state your name?
Hang on just a second. No, I'm just going to be speaking.
Sure, thanks.
I was going to do the video, Jackie, but it's not coming on.
In this meeting, but go ahead and identify yourself.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay. Well, alrighty then. Angela Parker, attorney with Carmen Parker. Do I need to be sworn in, President?
You do.
Pepper?
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Sure. You have up to
I
20
represent the
minutes.
petitioner, Red Truck. I also have on the call with me Ed Ryan. Ed is the one of the owners of this establishment, both the property and the restaurant that operates on site, which is Big Woods Bloomington, which, as you probably know, is a very popular local restaurant. A couple of points of clarification just to start. One is we understood from the architect that the height was 12 foot. Eric is reading that to be 11 foot 9 inches. We can make it work with that 3 foot difference, but for clarification, we had requested a relief from the 25 foot down to 12 foot. And the other thing that I wanted to point out, which I think is somewhat relevant, is we've struggled in the UDO with this definition of building or structure as an accessory structure, because when we initially started on this project, we were really thinking of it as an accessory structure, which does not have in the UDO this minimum requirement standard. And if you read the definition, it says that it means a subsidiary or auxiliary building or structure located on the same zoning lot with the primary building or structure that is customarily incidental to that primary building. And then it has the word or the primary use. And so it's in the alternative. Certainly this addition would be accessory to the main building because the main building is the primary use where the kitchen and service areas stem from. So you can have the primary building without this accessory, but you can't have this accessory building without the primary. So, we think there's some challenge there with regard to how this structure is being defined under the UDO and some question about that. Our election at this point was to proceed to seek a variance just to try to put this issue to rest entirely because the planning staff did not agree with us that this addition would be accessory and not require a variance. So that's just a couple of points of clarification and question. As an addition to an existing structure, as Eric pointed out, this proposed addition is an adaptation and extension onto the property from a one-story building. It's entirely consistent with the already existing buildings all around it, to the north, to the east, immediately adjacent across the alley to the south. The addition to be constructed will extend, as I said, directly off of this one story. I think to require otherwise on this site just really works a very awkward result. And as for the statutory findings for a variance, planning staff positively finds that the variance wouldn't be injurious to health, safety, morals, and welfare, doesn't have an adverse impact on use and value. In fact, one of the things that was omitted from your packet that I hope you have were several letters of support from adjacent property owners who are in favor of this occurring. And Eric, you might speak to that later in the meeting after our presentation is finished, because we had several letters of support from adjacent owners who support this variance. It certainly does not have an adverse impact. But the staff report questions its usefulness, this project, in furthering the UDO's plan for compact urban form and development that's now directed into this zone by what I'm still thinking of as a new UDO. But the relief that's requested from this 25-foot standard, it really does preserve and enhance the neighborhood as it appears today, in keeping with the current character of this area, which I think we all value in the present tense. We recognize that this UDO calls for compact urban form and future development in this zone and overlay. And that might make sense here if the improvements on this parcel were being, if it was being scraped and this was a new construction effort, but it's not. It's just an extension of an already existing one-story structure. So it seems like an incredibly reasonable way to expand this facility without scraping the entire site. Finally, I just want to make a brief note on the practical difficulties in the use of this site. Those absolutely exist here, starting with the overhead power line that would have to be relocated at a substantial cost to get to a required height. And we outlined some of those things in our petition and our packet, and I don't want to take the time to repeat all of those, but I certainly would draw your attention to those practical difficulties that we cite in our packet. The adaptation of this already existing one-story building to accommodate this local business effort at growth and success is not only sound public policy, but it really does help promote local general welfare of the community. It creates no harm, no prejudice, no detriment to the neighboring properties. And as you will see from the letters in support, it's the opposite effect. So in this instance, relief from this 25-foot standard meets the criteria that's statutorily required to support a variance. We respectfully request that you allow this reduction in height for this project that, as pointed out by Mr. Grulich, otherwise meets all of the UDO requirements to allow this very successful business to continue to grow in this location. I yield my time now to one of the owners of the establishment, Ed Ryan. Ed?
State your name for the record.
Unmute.
I think I unmuted.
Yep. Okay, please state your name.
Ed Ryan.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, thank you all for hanging in there tonight. Appreciate this opportunity to present our story. And I'm not a developer, but I did have plenty of time to read the UDO tonight. And really, I think it is a great document. And as Angela mentioned, though, it's clear that, it's new, and this is a developing process for Bloomington, a town that I've had a 58-year history with. And I think I can add a little bit more color to this discussion regarding why we're doing this. You may or may not be familiar with the tent that we've had off and on in the beer garden. It's a wonderful addition to the space. It's difficult to run a restaurant operation with the changing weather and whatnot in Indiana. So when we have that tent, it makes it much easier to have a stable operation. And it really does affect the profitability and viability of the restaurant. But the fire marshal has issues with tent structures being up permanently. So we have to move forward with development on the space. And that's why we're proposing to do this. what I'd like to do is, I enjoyed what Mr. Throckmorton said about we can talk round and around about this, but let me give you reasons to grant the variance. The first one is no one will see this addition from the street if it's 12 feet tall. And under the MDUV outline in the UDO, I get what's going on in Bloomington and the beautiful structures that are being added, but that is not what's happening here. This is a 600 square foot addition to a 15,000 square foot site. It represents 4% of the space. And as Angela said, putting a 2-story addition in the middle of these buildings that doesn't make any sense, especially if it looks anything like what's in the drawings in the forward-looking plan for Bloomington. And that gets right to paragraph 4 of the purpose of the UDOs, protecting the character and stability of the area. I think that's exactly what we're proposing we do here. And Angela mentioned our neighbors all support this. I mean, every neighbor supports it. And every guest that's visited our site, we've had a display up showing them what we want to do. I haven't heard one negative comment about our plans. Back to the UDO and the purpose of the UDO, paragraph 1, I think this is the poster child of orderly, responsible development. The purpose, paragraph 2, reduce greenhouse emissions. I need a 600 square foot, 1-story structure for the comfort of my guests, which gets to paragraph 3. But back to paragraph 2, a 2-story structure will absolutely, positively create more CO2 during the construction process. And honestly, I can't service that a bigger space. The kitchen in the primary structure can only feed so many people. There's no way that, I would love nothing more to have more seats, but there's no way we can do that. We can't service those people with a 2-story structure. So we build a 2-story structure, half of it sits empty, but we have to condition that space in the summer and in the winter, and it will have lighting and whatnot, which will continue to perpetuate excess CO2 emissions. So in closing, I think it's clear that this project abides by all of the relevant purposes that were laid out in the construction of the UDO, and I would appreciate your support of this variance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan. Okay, we are to the board for any questions.
I don't have any questions.
Do you have any questions, Tim? Okay, I don't have any questions either, so then we are to the public for any comments. There's no one in the chamber who would like to speak to this, I don't believe. Is there anybody online, Jackie? Nobody's online. Okay, so then we are back to the petitioner for further comments. This is your last opportunity. There's time remaining. Do you have any further comments you'd like to make before we discuss a motion?
I would do just a really quick wrap up if I might. I think we've got a few more minutes on our time. I don't want to take up all of our time because there's no reason to. But I think it's clear in this case that application of this, strict application of this standard for an addition like this in an already existing lot and building and use serving and continuing to serve this purpose really makes no sense. And so it seems that allowing a 1-story structure here to accommodate the growth of this business and really the difficulty across the board, as Mr. Ryan just spoke to, makes it very difficult for them to otherwise utilize this space and have the kind of economic growth that we want to promote in this community. So for those reasons, I think the findings would fall in favor of granting a variance on this one standard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we are back to the board for action. Would anybody like to make a motion? I'm happy to make a motion. Okay. So I'm going to make it a motion to approve V-31-23 with the alternate finding for number 3, that the proposed addition is to an existing or a developed a building that appears to be an accessory structure to a historic home. So we have a unique situation here on the site where we have a one-story building that looks like a garage or an accessory structure to a historic structure, house in this case, which is the kind of main part of the restaurant. And because of this previously existing building, this is really just an expansion of that building. So matching that would follow. In addition, there is a power line up above, which creates complexity in making a taller structure at this location. Would that be sufficient findings?
You want me to second that?
I don't know. I want to make sure that I have sufficient findings.
I think the board's findings are the board's findings.
Okay,
I'm not gonna-
so that's the board's findings.
So Barry, real quickly, I have typed up what you've written, but a lot of that I think you also saw duplicated in the petitioner's proposed findings. So certainly you could also move to adopt their findings, which duplicates a lot of the language that you were just touching on.
The adoption roof line. We've had the cost relocating. I'm happy to adopt those findings, although maybe striking the cost of the relocating the power line, because that really isn't
Sure.
something that factors into it. But I do also want to make a point that this property is comprised primarily of a historic home. It's a restaurant and a historic home, and it has a unique character, and that the building that is being added to functions as an accessory structure physically on the site, and does not overpower the historic home. And that's an important aspect, and a reason why following the one-story height as an expansion would be appropriate for this location.
Yeah, I think we can, as long as you all think that's fine, then Melissa can, get that from the minutes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Any discussion?
Sorry, I may have missed this. I may be the only person to miss this. What is the finding for criteria number 2?
Number 2 is that there are no adverse.
Yeah, I think staff
had-
found no adverse impact for
Yeah,
number 2. Is that correct, Eric?
Yeah,
That's correct, yes.
yeah, that's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, no.
It's a little
Number
ambiguous,
one,
that's why I'm
found no adverse
asking.
impacts. Number 2, I did.
You did,
So,
you did,
the board
okay.
could simply make the opposite findings, that they do not find adverse impacts to the use and value of immediately surrounding properties. I don't know that necessarily needs further expanding on, other than to simply state that you don't find.
Right. Well, the only thing I would say is we would find it consistent with the historic character of that portion of the block. Okay? Okay, so we are ready for a vote.
All right. Farrell?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Ballard?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the variance is approved. Good luck, and we are adjourned. Thank you.